Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting on March 2nd, 2020. I am excited to welcome our Scouts from the Scouts of America today, and they are bringing in the flag, and they will be leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Color Guard, present the colors. Color Guard, post the colors. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. The audience may be seated. My name is Zoe, and what I like about scouting is that we have really fun camping trips, and yeah.
Hi, my name is Layla, and my favorite thing about scouting is earning cup coins. Hi, my name is Carolina, and my favorite thing about scouting is the camping trips.
Hi, my name is Dylan. My favorite thing about Cub Scouts is the camping trips.
Hi, my name is Alex, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouts is the activities.
Hi, my name is Spencer, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouts is so many opportunities to outdoor recreational activities.
Hi, my name is Jason, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouts is the activities.
Hi, my name is Ryder, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouts is the activities. Hi, my name is Myra, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouting is the camping trips.
Hi, my name is Samantha, and my most favorite thing about Scouts is the activities and games.
Hi, my name is Lily Garrett, and my favorite thing about Scouting is the camping trips.
Hi, my name is Kai, and my favorite thing about Cub Scouts is helping others.
My name is Greg Leung. I'm the Assistant Cub Master. We are Pack 3, based in the San Mateo Highlands, serving about 40 scouts from all over San Mateo in elementary school. Our pack was established in 1954, which makes us one of the oldest packs in the peninsula. In case you're not familiar with it, the mission of BSA is to prepare young people to make ethical and moral choices over their lifetimes by instilling in them the values of the Scout Oath and Law. And it's also to prepare every eligible youth in America. And as you can see, the eligible youth has doubled. We are a third girls in our pack, and that we hope to keep rising to 50% very soon. To become responsible and participating citizens and leaders guided by the Scout Oath and Law. And it's our pleasure to be here tonight.
So I want to say welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for bringing in the flag and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome to all the Boy Scouts and the Girl Scouts and the non-binary Scouts and whatever. I think that what you're doing is incredible, and you're learning about citizenship, good citizenship, and how to serve your community and how to serve your country, and we all welcome you, and you should keep doing what you're doing. So let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you call roll?
With pleasure, Mayor. Councilmember Pappen.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Bonilla.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Rodriguez.
Here.
Mayor Goethals.
Here. It is next my pleasure for this next ceremonial item to recognize Peninsula Volunteers, Inc. and the Meals on Wheels program. We are celebrating them in this month of March, and I have this proclamation. Whereas every week, Peninsula Volunteers, Inc. Meals on Wheels delivers over 3,000 nutritious meals to primarily homebound seniors and adults with disabilities who cannot cook or shop for themselves. And whereas the goal of PVI Meals on Wheels is to increase food security and access to nutritious food, thus keeping older adults and adults with disabilities well-nourished, healthy, and living independently. And whereas this valuable service prepares meals with strict nutritional oversight, with no added salt and low amounts of fat and sugar, providing at least 1/3 of an adult's recommended daily nutritional intake. And whereas the provision of healthy meals is a part of PVI's mission to create programs and services that ensure that San Mateo County seniors are engaged, cared for, and respected as vital members of our community. And whereas this year marks the 43rd year PVI Meals on Wheels has participated in March for Meals, an annual effort to increase public awareness of senior hunger in our community. Now, therefore, this City Council of the City of San Mateo, California, hereby recognizes Peninsula Volunteers, Inc., Meals on Wheels, the March for Meals. Be it further resolved, community members are encouraged to participate in volunteer opportunities and activities related to March for Meals. Dated March 2nd, 2020, Joe Goethals, Mayor. Congratulations on another successful year and all your future success.
Thank you. Delicious meals.
So welcome, please tell us.
Thank you. Thank you for your support. As you know, we've been in the community providing Meals on Wheels for 43 years. The City of San Mateo has always been very supportive in the work that we do and making sure that we're funded and letting people know that seniors do not go unheard. They do not go unanswered. And that's one of the things that we're able to do is to go into the homes and provide those meals. What I'd ask is your continued support. Funding is our biggest barrier. Right now, we receive 40% from the County of San Mateo's Aging and Adult Services. So Peninsula Volunteers is out fundraising for the other 60%. Meals are $16 per meal per day. So any type of outreach, any type of support that we're able to get from you is greatly appreciated. The number of seniors is growing and the number of seniors facing hunger is growing. There's an estimated 16,000 in San Mateo County alone. We're providing just over 1,000 meals. We have a waiting list of close to 600. 100 of those are in the city of San Mateo. So your continued support, your continued activity, we're extremely grateful, and we're grateful for this honor. I would like to introduce Becky Flanagan. Becky is stepping in as the new director for Meals on Wheels for Peninsula Volunteers, and to be able to share a story just about, it's not just the meal that's so vital.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This is an honor. As you mentioned, the clients get a very nutritious meal each day. For some clients, more important than the meal sometimes is that connection that they have with seeing somebody. They're homebound individuals. Often our driver's the only person they see in a day. We had a story last week that really demonstrates how important that connection can be. Our driver showed up at the client's door, knocked at the door, and he could hear her behind the door, but she wasn't coming to the door like she usually did. So he called the office, and we reached out to the client. The phone rang and rang. She didn't come to the phone. So we knew something was wrong. We called the emergency numbers and got the fire department to come. The driver waited there. He had other clients, but he waited with this client to make sure the fire department got in. And sure enough, she had fallen. She was having a medical emergency. They took her by ambulance. And the next day she called us so grateful, because had he not taken the time to make sure she was okay, she might not have made it. She might not have survived. So our meals are so much more than just the meal. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that wonderful story. I was just going to point out that our former Mayor, Mary Pappen, went on a ride-along last year.
You remember.
Last year.
It was
She went on a ride-along, and it was such an impactful...
it was an eye-opener.
Yes.
It's an eye-opener.
Oh, absolutely, and especially the Hacienda, our apartments over there, and they were expecting us. Like, it left a tremendous impact on me. You're absolutely right.
he
Godspeed.
has his
I really
day.
appreciate what you do for our seniors. It is amazing. So,
And it inspired me to go on the ride-along,
Did you?
which we've already scheduled.
Oh, great.
It's going to happen next week.
Let me know what you think.
I've
It's
invited
amazing.
Councilmember Lee to come with me.
Great.
And I know that Rick Bonilla and Eric Rodriguez also support this very important, vital program. We have committed as a priority that the city is going to be an aging-friendly population. We're part of this global effort to take care of our seniors and our elder population. So thank you so much for what you do every day. To you, you call them clients. To us, they are community members, and we serve them every day. So thank you very much. I'd love to take a picture with the proclamation.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, could you read the items on the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered by the council to be routine and will be enacted by one motion without discussion. If discussion is desired, that item may be removed and considered separately. Item number 2, City Council meeting minutes approval. Item number 3, Private Development and Right-of-Way Support Services Agreement and Amendment. Item number 4, Building Access Control System Maintenance and Agreement. Item number 5, Main Library Children's Area Remodel Contract Change Order. Item number 6, Annual Sewer Basin Rehabilitation On-Call Agreements. And item number 7, Board and Commission Appointments Subcommittee, Park and Recreation Commission.
Thank you very much. That is the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council wishing to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there any member of the public wishing to remove an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
So moved. Approve.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. One plug for one of the items, the Children's Main Library improvements. There's actually going to be a ribbon cutting for the children's section. It's been open for a while, but there will be a ribbon cutting on March 21st at the main library at 2 o'clock. So anyone who wants to be there for the ribbon cutting is welcome to join us. With that, we are at the point for public comment. Members of the public who are wishing to comment on any item that is not appearing on the agenda may address the City Council at this time. State law prevents Council from taking action on any item not on the agenda, so your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up at a later time. Public comment in total is limited to 15 minutes. Each speaker can speak for 3 minutes tonight. Do we have any speaker slips, Madam Clerk? 3 speaker slips. Please call the first speaker.
First speaker is Marissa Godfrey, followed by Eileen Ghanem, and then Diana Pettit.
Welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Much appreciated City Council members, that's what I'm going to title you, for allowing us to address you again about the Marina Lagoon dredging decision on your agenda. We would like to thank Ms. Lee, Mr. Bonilla, and Mayor Goethals for coming out to personally view what we live with on the south end of the lagoon. So I'm representing a group of 5 women, and we are the Laguna Vista Marina Lagoon Committee, and I'm going to issue this statement. So we're urging City Council to commit to finding the funding source for the dredging project in 2020 and this year, so that work may begin as soon as possible. The south end of the lagoon is past its tipping point. Case in point, in preparation for the first water rise last Saturday, the maintenance staff dredged 5 feet of accumulated silt on the side of the Belmont side of O'Neill Slough, just to be able to open the gates, which were completely trapped, closed. They stated that this had accumulated in just a year. Once gates are open, the silt flows to the lagoon in the San Mateo side in disproportionate amounts compared to the north gate where the pumps operate. The south end gate feeds 50% of the total lagoon's water. So here are the proposed funding sources that we would like for you to consider. We would like, number one, for you to propose the project for funding to the Flooding and Sea Level Rise Resiliency Agency with the backing of the city councils of Belmont, San Carlos, and Foster City, which are all affected by the worsening problem. After all, its primary purpose is to act as a flood and stormwater retention basin serving all the residents. Number two, combine the project, the dredging project, with the proposed construction of a higher levee at North Shoreview, at the North Shoreview end if feasible. This would mean dredging the silt from the south end and reusing it for the levee project. This would probably involve less environmental agencies. And by the way, the soil samples were deemed non-toxic by Moffett and Nickel Engineering Construction Company, hired in 2018 to do a dredging analysis by the City Council. So number three would be use approved Measure S existing quarter-cent sales tax, which is good for 30 years. The tax was designed as a general tax with revenue deposited into the general fund to be used for any government purpose. Marina Lagoon is the city's largest park. Its asset to the community is irrefutable, and as of now, the south end is lost to any watercraft, and only 33% of its 4.5 approximate miles remains navigable.
Are you giving a presentation for all three of you, or?
This is for my committee, and she's just, I'm doing the presentation for everyone.
Perfect.
This is it.
I'm going to let you finish.
I'm almost
Go
done.
ahead. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
And number four is spread the cost among all the first three proposals. And five is put another measure before the voters and ask for another quarter-cent increase to fund the project if all other sources of funding fail. So thank you for your consideration. We urge you to find the funding source for the estimated $9 million, thereabouts, needed to dredge the south end of Marina Lagoon and restore it to its full use. And I have the same statement, copies of that for all of you.
Thank you so much for that
You're
and
welcome.
for your continued support. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next speaker is Aline Ghanem, followed by Diana Pettit.
Welcome.
Hi, I'm here to talk about Shake Shack in Hillsdale Mall and New Yorkism. First, I want to define New Yorkism. New Yorkism is now California is becoming more as Western New York. And New Yorkism, what I define New Yorkism is gentrification, high rent, Wall Street, housing crisis, overpopulation, traffic, and Shake Shack replacing In-N-Out. Shake Shack in many places in California will negatively affect In-N-Out's, our #1 burger place economy. By choosing to eat and support Shake Shack, you'll negatively affect #1 California burger In-N-Out economy and supporting New Yorkism. I want to protect California-owned businesses and protect Bay Area and California culture. We're supposed to, I don't know, like California has become like a stress place to live, even though we were known to be a chill place to live. And, you know, it's getting worse over time. And that is why I don't not support Shake Shack in Hillsdale Mall. And I hope that City Council one day replace In-N-Out with a California restaurant-owned business.
Thank you so much for your comments, and your message is heard loud and clear to buy local and support local businesses. Thank you.
Next speaker is Diana Pettit.
Welcome, Ms. Pettit.
Hi, how are you today,
Good.
Mayor? Okay, I am here to talk about PA 201901. That is the project in which 4th and 5th Avenue, the housing project. Okay, I went to the meeting on the 24th over at the Central Park Center. And at that meeting, first of all, the meeting started 15 minutes late, but not only that, there were so many people there, the room was not big enough, okay? But one of the things, I felt that there wasn't enough neighborhood support to this thing because I had been to another meeting before at Lori Watatuki's house where they came and they talked to Central. I feel that all the neighborhoods should have been more approached. One of the things that bothered me there was a woman who came and she had a disabled son with her. And she had mentioned that she had asked the speaker, the person who's the head of Mid-Peninsula Housing, well, if we're getting older and our kids are not going to have a place to live, they can't stay in our houses, will they be able to have one of those units? And basically, I don't think that the answer was answered right. It was like, yes, they could live here, but really you need to go and check it out with like handicap, something like that. I felt that that was a little misleading since it is basically for lower income is one of the proposals that the city's like for police, teachers, librarians, families who can't afford living. But one of the things that I want to talk about is that property site, okay? First of all, I'm not really feeling like we really know what's going to go with the train, the electrification of the train and our streets, whether it's going to be, the train is going to be lifted up like it is over on 31st and 28th, or if it's going to stay down below. I feel that this is a very important project. We need the housing, and the sooner that we can get this project off the ground, the better it is. I do feel, though, that building is much too close to the train tracks, even though I know that the situation where we've looked, you know, they've had the building inspected and all that, that it is good. I am here to ask.
30 more seconds, Ms. Pettit.
Okay. That 1949 Pacific Boulevard, which is the Public Works Department's, it's really very great for this. It's got a sidewalk already. The parking lot that's there is never hardly used by the public. I know that you've before were thinking about when you were doing the water cleaning thing, you just didn't know what to do with the equipment for Public Works. But honestly, if you look there, there's other housing on the other side. There's Mode. There's the train station down the street. Is it not possible that we could possibly relocate this project 7 stories high?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insight.
Thank you, Ms. Pettit. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during the public comment period? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment period, bring it back to the council. We are moving into item number 8, which is a public hearing on the parking in lieu fee increase. I'm going to welcome Sue Ellen Atkinson, our principal transportation planner.
Hi, good evening. Mayor Goethals, City Council members, thank you for having me. I'm Sue Ellen Atkinson, Principal Transportation Planner with Public Works. I'm here tonight for the parking in lieu fee increase approval. So just a brief history and refresher on where we have been with the parking in lieu fee. In July 2015, the City Council approved a 3-year increase through July 2017 for the parking in lieu fee, starting at $12,000 up to $25,000. Thereafter, the parking in lieu fee went up in 2018 by the cost of inflation. In July 2019, staff came before City Council to recommend that the annual inflator be the construction cost index for the San Francisco Bay Area, which was approved at that time. At that time, City Council directed staff to come back with an increased parking in lieu fee above where it was set in July 2019 at $26,311. City Council heard staff's recommendation in November on the increased amount for the parking in lieu fee. Staff did a cost study for the parking in lieu fee based on neighboring jurisdictions, based on construction cost for parking spaces and parking structures in other municipalities, and estimates for upcoming parking structures. The costs that were looked at as part of that study were based on above grade parking. Costs are higher for below grade construction at about twice as much for the first grade below, and then about 2.2 times for the third level, and so on. Based on the expectation that the tennis court garage in the city's downtown will be the next parking structure to be constructed, and that will include at least one floor of below grade parking. Staff estimated a cost of $42,000 to $57,000 for construction of one level at grade and below grade for a parking structure. In November, the City Council direction was $50,000 per space, which we've graphed here in relation to other neighboring jurisdictions. Staff came before City Council in February with some information about the parking in lieu fee and application within our Central Parking Improvement District. So just as a reminder, the Central Parking Improvement District issued bonds in the 1950s to build public parking structures. All of the properties within the CPID were charged a minimum uniform amount for bond repayment. Within the CPID is a smaller zone called the Primary Benefit Zone that was created in the late 1980s to fund construction for downtown parking. Within that zone, properties were charged an additional parking deficiency assessment. Within this zone, in current application, there's a credit of 10 parking spaces for projects that are designated as change of use. So when the amount of parking required for a project is determined based on the parking ratios in our zoning code, there's a credit of 10 parking spaces that is applied for change of use projects within that primary benefit zone. During that session, City Council identified concerns that the current parking requirements in our zoning code may exceed the actual demand in the downtown, and directed staff to evaluate the parking ratios and determine if those ratios are accurate. That is a comprehensive study that will take several months. In addition, staff will be looking into potential reductions for provision of transportation demand management measures, and we'll be back to City Council when that study is complete. So the recommended path forward based on all of those items is to maintain the current parking credit, so maintain that existing 10-space credit for change of use projects. Okay. Is it showing? You got it? Okay. Okay. Maintain the current 10-space parking credit for change of use projects and include an evaluation of that credit in the comprehensive parking study. Staff intends to bring an ordinance to City Council on March 16th to introduce an interim project-specific parking demand study. So that would amend the zoning code to allow, on an interim basis, a project to conduct a parking demand study to evaluate what the parking demand for that specific project would be, rather than utilizing the parking requirements that are in the zoning code. And that would address the gap between now and when the comprehensive parking study is completed. And then as part of that ordinance, staff will also introduce objective standards for evaluating requests to pay the parking in lieu fee. Currently, staff assesses those requests on a project-by-project basis. And based on guidance from the City Attorney's Office, we will develop objective standards for determining application of parking in lieu fee and evaluating those requests. And a differentiation between the full Central Parking Improvement District and the smaller limited parking zone contained therein, where fewer spaces are allowed to be provided on site. And that will give staff objective measurements by which to evaluate those parking in lieu requests that come in within our downtown. So just graphically, the timeline for implementation. So tonight we're here for the parking in lieu fee increase, and that fee would be effective in 60 days on May 1st. Coming before you on March 16th is the ordinance for the interim parking demand study allowance and those objective standards. The first read for that ordinance would be March 16th, with the second read scheduled on April 6th. The ordinance would take effect on May 7th, so there's a very small time frame between which the increased parking in lieu fee, if approved tonight, would take effect and when that parking demand study would be available for development projects. So tonight we are here on a resolution to increase the parking in lieu fee to $50,000 per space. Again, that fee is available for development projects within our Central Parking Improvement District only. Staff included an annual increase by the Engineering News Record San Francisco Construction Cost Index in the resolution before you tonight. And if approved, the increased fee would take effect 60 days from adoption, which is May 1st. Also contained within that resolution is a provision that projects with approved planning applications would be subject to the fee in effect at the time the planning entitlement was approved. So the recommendation from staff for this evening's action is to adopt a resolution to increase the parking in lieu fee and update the city's fiscal year 2019-2020 and fiscal year 2020 to 21 comprehensive fee schedules. That concludes the staff presentation. I'm available for comments.
Thank you very much, Sue. Any questions from the council before I ask for public comment? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this issue? Bringing it back to, I'll close the public comment period, bring it back to council. Any comments, or I would entertain a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion, if that's all right with you.
Sure.
So I'll move to adopt a resolution to increase the parking in lieu fee and update the city's fiscal 2019-20 and fiscal 2021 comprehensive fee schedules.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Sue. Sue Ellen? Sue Ellen, I know. Sue Ellen, excuse me. Next, I'm going to invite up for item number 9, Carly Hamilton, the management analyst, to discuss fiscal year 2020-2021 comprehensive fee schedule.
Members of the City Council, my name's Carly Hamilton. Like you said, I'm a management analyst in the finance department.
Welcome.
Thank you. The item before you is the public hearing for the annual revisions to the comprehensive fee schedule. Public notice was made February 17th and 24th of this year. Fees are reviewed annually and are typically increased by CPI, which was 3% this year. Fees are cost recovery and not to exceed the cost of providing the service. And as a reminder, sewer service fees are not included in this process. The changes I've highlighted for you include new fees, fees increase in excess of CPI, eliminated fees, and reduced fees. New fees are for new services or existing services we had not previously charged for. Fees that are increased in excess of CPI are usually due to salary schedule increases, like in the case of the police department. The transportation improvement fees are based on the Construction Cost Index, or CCI. And this year, we transitioned from using the national CCI to San Francisco Bay Area CCI to better represent the true cost of construction in San Mateo. And this resulted in a 9.01% increase of those fees. Eliminated fees are for services we're no longer providing, and in the case of the building division, previously included were the credit card convenience fees, but those have been removed to accommodate the implementation of the credit card convenience fee, which will take effect on July 1st of 2020. And finally, as mentioned in the agenda report, the Community Development and Public Works departments are undergoing a fee study, and those will bring proposals for additional changes at a later date. And with that, I'm happy to field any questions. And we also have representatives from each department to better answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Any questions from the council?
I had one. I just found it when we're talking about the park in lieu fees, and that the cost per acre of land decreased.
Yes.
Did I read that right?
Yes, that's correct.
How much did it decrease by?
Let me see if we have it here.
I don't mean to be in disbelief, but I'm in disbelief. It didn't say on the attachment. I just
Okay.
I didn't
I
know.
can get that to you if you'd like at a later time, but I don't have.
Was
that
it significant,
currently.
if you recall?
I'm not
When
sure.
this
I'd have to look at the actual calculation. It's like I said, it's not CPI. It's a separate.
Oh,
I mean, this is the first time I've heard of land going down in value. So
Ma'am, are you a new employee?
Sheila Kanzian, Director of Parks and Recreation. We too were surprised. It did not go down a lot, but we use the same benchmark every year. So we're comparing wherever we get the information from on a year-to-year basis. And so that's just happened to work into the fee this year. So other than saying that perhaps there are some parcels that went down over others, I'm not sure that I have a very scientific answer for you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we take public comment? Seeing none, we have one speaker. Please come forward.
Sean Forbreck.
3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Sean Fahrenbrook, 625 Parrot. My question / comment, I guess, is more for the City Council with you in attendance. It comes to the tree deposits, the tree replacement. I recently did replace a tree, and I elected to forfeit my deposit. And the reason is, and this is kind of some guidance for the council, if perhaps you could look into this, is that the requirement for the deposit, for example, an oak tree, is that you replace with a 2-foot box tree. If you've ever tried to lift a 2-foot box tree and plant it, and the preparation that's required for it, it's more cost effective to abandon the permit and not replant the tree. Everyone's, of course, in favor of trees, but at some point it's just not practical to do this. What I'd ask the council to examine is if it's possible, if you could change the ordinance or talk with the department to make it so it's a 1-foot box tree. Okay, so it takes an extra year or two to grow, but you'll get more trees that will be replanted because right now I'm going to forfeit the deposit. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Are there any other public speakers? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the council for any comments. But before we do that, did you want to comment on that particular statement?
Yeah, so that fee is actually a deposit. That's why it's not increased. It's, again, a deposit, so if you plant the tree, that money is supposed to come back to you.
And I'm going to give this nice young woman who appears to be a Park and Rec employee a chance to also respond.
So we have heard from some folks, similar to this gentleman, that it is more cost effective to not have the tree planted as part of their own deposit. All of the money that is taken in from those deposits goes into our tree planting fund. And so all of that money goes back into planting trees somewhere in the city, street trees, park trees, or whatever. The ordinance does say that a replacement tree for a heritage tree removal is a 24-inch box tree. The next size down is a 15-gallon tree, which if any of you are familiar with 15-gallon trees, they're pretty small in terms of the size. And it's been probably 10 years or so when we raised it from a 15-gallon to a 24-inch box tree. We are going to be looking at, on a comprehensive level, at our heritage tree ordinance here within the next couple months. We're happy to bring that consideration back to our Park and Recreation Commission to see whether or not they have any comments on that one.
Sheila, remind us, in order to be categorized as a heritage tree, it has to have a width of some number of inches, doesn't it?
Right, 10 inches in diameter for certain species, oak, bay, buckeye, and those kinds of things, and 16 inches for any other typical tree.
I mean, so a heritage tree is a big tree.
Very,
and so
very
when you're
big.
replacing it, a 2-foot box tree is a tree that's only a couple years old?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Generally, they're probably 5 to 6 feet when they get planted.
Probably not easy for one person to pick up, but it replaces a big heritage tree with something
Correct.
more substantial. Thank you so much, Sheila. Any other comments? Or I would entertain a motion. Do we need a motion here? We do, right?
I make a motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
But none, that passes unanimously. And we're moving on to old business, item number 10, accessory dwelling unit, junior accessory dwelling unit, ordinance update. And we have a presentation from Philip Brennan, Associate Planner. Welcome, Philip.
Good evening to Mayor Goethals and members of the council. My name is Philip Brennan. I'm the project planner for this accessory dwelling unit and junior accessory dwelling unit ADU update. Before you is our format for tonight's agenda. Are we, I'm sorry. Okay. Before you use tonight's agenda, I just want to make note that we do have a few slides to work through. That's due in large part just due to the nature of the state laws. They're quite nuanced, and so they require some detail to work through. I also wanted to mention that as I go through the remaining areas of local discretion in subsection under Section 4, a corresponding question for council will be provided. At the end of the presentation, I'll restate the question and provide staff's recommendation for council's consideration, comments, and direction. With that, I think a good starting point is to actually define the terms. What exactly an accessory dwelling unit and a junior accessory dwelling unit is. The state defines accessory dwelling units, or ADUs for short, to mean an attached or detached residential dwelling unit that provides complete independent living facilities for one or more persons that is located on the same lot with a proposed or existing primary residence. ADUs are required to include permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation on the same parcel as a single family or multifamily dwelling, or where it's going to be situated. ADUs provide a property owner the most flexibility as these dwellings can be attached or detached, constructed as an addition or as a conversion of an existing space or accessory structure, such as a garage, shed, or pool house. And under state law, manufactured or tiny homes meeting certain requirements can also be defined as an ADU and permitted. A junior accessory dwelling unit, or JADU, means a unit that is no more than 500 square feet in size and contained entirely within the walls of an existing or proposed single-family residence. This is typically a conversion of an existing bedroom or garage. The JADU must include at least an efficiency kitchen, which includes a cooking facility with appliances, a food preparation counter, and storage cabinets. One of the distinguishing differences between an ADU and a JADU is that the JADU may include separate sanitation facilities or a bathroom, or may share the sanitation facilities with the existing residents. Additionally, JADUs are required to provide a deed restriction which stipulates owner occupancy of one of the dwellings and prohibits the sale of the JADU apart from the primary residence, and it limits the size and attributes of the JADU to those specified by the state. A little bit of background, in 2016 and 2017, the state passed several housing bills aimed at easing parking requirements, the permitting process, fees, and other local zoning controls with the intent of encouraging more ADUs and JADUs. The impact of those initial rounds of reforms were seen immediately as there was a marked increase in ADU applications submitted to the city between 2016 and 2019 after the laws went into effect, in contrast to the prior years. There is significant community interest in ADUs. In spring of 2019, the city hosted two community conversation events in conjunction with the Home for All Collaborative. During these events, members of staff, the Planning Commission, and City Council participated. During these meetings, the attendees specified ADUs as one of the favored housing options to help meet community needs. An interest in easing the permitting process for ADUs and more options for financing were some of the major themes coming out of those meetings. At the 2019-2020 goal-setting meeting, the council directed staff to study ADUs and JADUs with regard to our local regulations and explore opportunities to streamline the permitting process for residents. I just wanted to touch on briefly staff efforts. In response to the council's direction and in anticipation of increased interest in ADUs resulting from the new state laws, staff has explored and continues to assess ways to streamline the permitting process, educate the public, and introduce programs that can help ease the permitting process, the process of building ADUs and JADUs. Staff has been working with Symbiom, a company that helps visualize and land use and zoning regulations. And in fact, San Mateo is one of the first cities to utilize the Build platform. This is a highly intuitive web platform that will be accessible to the public, providing interactive mapping and simplifying complicated zoning regulations specifically for ADU and JADU development in the city of San Mateo. We're currently working with Symbiom to finalize some remaining information and functionality, but it should be ready to launch at some point this month. Information and education are fundamental to encouraging ADU development, and staff has assessed its existing handout materials and web pages to determine how the information could be more accessible and informative. As a result, we've consolidated our ADU, JADU, and standard building permit guide into one easy-to-read document, which provides all the necessary information for an applicant to submit a complete application. In terms of programs, staff is actively exploring and reviewing programs that can provide property owners with a range of benefits, including expedited design and permitting timelines, lowered costs, and all-in-one services. At the start of the year, several new ADU and JADU-related housing bills came into law, which built upon the aforementioned 2016-2017 legislation. Three specific Assembly bills and Senate bills took direct aim at easing local zoning controls, reducing associated development fees, and expediting processing associated with ADU and JADU development. A detailed summary of the primary changes for each bill created is provided in the administrative report, but to quickly summarize, SB 13 eliminates fees for ADUs less than 750 square feet and creates a tiered fee structure which charges ADUs more equitably based on size and removes owner occupancy requirements for ADUs. AB 68 and AB 881 are overlapping, and they eliminate minimum lot size requirements for ADUs, permits a property owner to build a JADU and an ADU on their property, and requires the city to take action on an application within 60 days of receiving a complete application. The new state laws were intended to remove regulatory barriers and zoning controls imposed at the local level, which in turn limits the city's ability to regulate ADU and JADU development. The new state legislation has expressly limited the ability of local agencies to regulate ADU and JADUs. Cities that haven't already adopted an ordinance compliant with the government code are required to default to the standards specified in the state law for permitting ADUs. As of January 1, 2020, any local ordinance that conflicts with the existing and updated requirements specified by the state is rendered null and void. Local agencies can simply default to the state regulations or elect to adopt the local ordinance with more permissive requirements than specified by the state, which brings us to the remaining areas of discretion. The updated state law has rather nuanced floor area and size regulations. Minimum and maximum floor area allowances are based on the development types, which can be broken down into three general categories: attached, detached, and by right. Provided on this slide are models that are actually scaled and with representing 5,000 square foot lots, which are typical in our R1C zoning districts, which comprise the vast majority of lots in the city. The building footprints represented here are also scaled and reflect accurately the square footage numbers indicated. Each site plan assumes a scenario in which you have a 5,000 square foot lot, which is common. The R1C has a prescribed 50% FAR, which means the lot of this size can be developed with a maximum of 2,500 square feet of structure, and that includes residence, garage, accessory structures. Attached ADUs cannot exceed more than 50% of the existing or proposed primary dwelling's floor area. This is shown at the top. It removes a previous restriction which capped an attached ADU to 50% of the primary dwelling floor area or 1,200 square feet. So that 1,200 square foot cap is now removed. In terms of detached ADUs are permitted to be up to 1,200 square feet in size, provided there's enough adequate floor allowance based on the underlying zoning district's prescribed ratio and lot size. As an example, you could develop a 5,000 square foot lot with 50% FAR with a 1,300 square foot primary residence and a detached 1,200 square foot ADU. One of the major benefits provided by the new ADU laws is the by right provision, which permits property owners the right to construct either an attached or detached ADU of at least 800 square feet with 4-foot side and rear setbacks and of at least 16 feet in height, regardless of any local ADU size restrictions. Proportionality to the primary residence, which is the aforementioned 50% threshold, limits on lot coverage, open space requirements, or minimum lot size. Again, using the 5,000 square foot lot with the 50% FAR scenario, a homeowner that's already developed the lot to the maximum extent, or 2,500 square feet, would still be able to build an 800 square foot ADU, which would result in the lot being developed with effectively 66% FAR, well above the underlying zoning district's maximum allowance.
That is a minimum under state law, correct?
That is a minimum, yes.
Okay. And if we adopt something that allows for
more permissive,
yes, then that would also apply to this scenario?
Yes.
Thank you. Just to clarify. Thank you.
Another major change brought forth by the new legislation is that now a single-family lot can be developed with an ADU and a JADU, in addition to the primary residence, which effectively creates a triplex. The city can choose to formally adopt the conditions specified by the state, which would limit the size of an ADU to 800 square feet when a JADU is present on the lot or being proposed in conjunction with an ADU. The size of the detached ADU would be restricted, but it would allow the property owner the ability to do a 400 square foot addition to the primary residence. Should the city not choose to adopt the limiting condition provided by the state, a detached ADU could be constructed to the maximum 1,200 square feet, provided the existing development would allow for it. And so, presuming the primary residence and ADU in this scenario are occupied by at least 2 to 3 adults in each dwelling, and 1 to 2 adults in the JADU, there's a realistic possibility of having at least 5 to 8 working adults with accompanying vehicles on the same lot. This presents a real concern, considering we have many neighborhoods with narrow streets that are overparked, have overparked on-street conditions. Staff is supportive with the intent of the legislation to create opportunities for increased affordable housing stock, but careful consideration should be given to how these changes will impact our single-family neighborhoods over time. Finally, the city can choose to establish by ordinance maximum building size for attached or detached ADUs. However, the state stipulates that the maximum size codified by the city is no less than 850 square feet for a studio or 1 bedroom, and no less than 1,000 square feet for 2 bedrooms or more. The city may also choose to not adopt its own ADU size maximums and can default to the building size parameters specified by the state, which don't speak to bedroom count requirements. In terms of building height, the state establishes an ADU will be allowed to be at least 16 feet in height. However, it should be noted that it does not explicitly state that a local agency must permit a 2-story ADU. I should also note that in our local ordinance, we measure building height from the finished grade to the top of plate, and the state doesn't specify in the code, in the state code, how they're measuring height. It just provides the height of 16 feet. So with regard to ADU building height, there's no conflict with our current municipal code, as ADUs default to the development standards of the underlying zoning district. So in our R1 zoning districts, the height limit is set at 24 feet to plate and 32 feet overall, so well above the 16 feet requirement of the state. Given the fact that many ADUs are conversions of existing accessory structures, such as detached garages, which are often built close to shared property lines, including no setbacks at all, the city may want to consider studying and establishing ADU height restrictions. In terms of parking, a new ADU with one or more bedrooms is required to provide one off-street parking space. This is important to note that in some of the larger build-out scenarios that we discussed previously, they would only, that lot would only be required to provide one off-street parking space. And even then, it's likely that they wouldn't have to provide any parking at all associated with the ADUs, because most of San Mateo would be eligible for a parking exemption provided by the state, which allows parcels that are within a half-mile of walking distance to public transit to be exempt from providing any parking. And that is the case for most of San Mateo, although we do have pockets within the city that are not within that half-mile buffer zone.
Wouldn't that include any Samtrans bus stop?
Yeah, it includes any public transit that charges a fee and runs on a fixed route. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I did include an attachment, attachment 3, that does show those areas of the city that are not captured in that, that exemption, by that exemption. Staff recommends considering exemptions to parking requirements in front yard paving to account for additional parking needs associated with ADUs and JADUs. SB 13 reduces impact fees charged for an ADU unit of 750 square feet or more. SB 13 eliminates parking, or excuse me, SB 13 reduces impact fees associated with any ADU that's less than 750 square feet. For those units that are over 750 square feet, it's charged proportionally in relation to the square footage of the primary dwelling unit. The city has not performed a nexus fee study, and as such does not currently apply traffic impact fees, park and lieu fees, or water and sewage hookup fees associated with ADU and JADU development. The city currently charges separate flat fees for ADUs and JADUs per unit, which covers the cost of associated plan review and inspections. The question for council is whether a nexus study should be conducted to inform what the appropriate impact fees are, and if there would be any interest in applying such fees to ADU development.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could you say again where it would be legal for the city to impose an impact fee? Because aren't some people exempt?
Yes. So, well, in terms of the SB 13 now stipulates that any ADU that's less than 750 square feet is exempt from impact fees.
Less than. So if it's more than 750, it would.
Then the charge would be proportional to the size of the primary dwelling.
Got it. Thank you.
So through the mayor, could you explain that last part?
In terms of how it's charged proportionally, I'm not completely informed on how they would charge that, how that would be determined. I think the nexus study would be part of that in determining the appropriate calculation and fee to charge.
So that's just the language we were given.
That's the language that we're given,
Okay.
yeah. In terms of objective standards, local agencies still have a limited ability to adopt objective standards as part of the ADU and JADU development requirements, provided it doesn't conflict with state law or otherwise prevent the construction of an ADU or JADU. Two particular examples the city may want to consider incorporating into our local ordinance would be requiring privacy glazing along side and rear elevations of second-story ADUs and JADUs within 20 feet of a neighboring dwelling. This would help in mitigating privacy concerns with adjacent properties, especially given the fact that ADUs have reduced setbacks and can be located close to shared side and rear property lines. The second would be requiring street-facing address markers for all ADUs and JADUs for fire and safety purposes. The city currently does not have this as a requirement. SB 13 prohibits short-term rentals, in essence, rental terms less than 30 days, of ADUs in the following scenarios. When an ADU is located with an existing or proposed single-family dwelling, when a city has adopted a condition that limits a detached ADU to 800 square feet, and where a JADU exists, or for ADUs and multifamily developments. The state provides the city discretion to prohibit short-term rentals for all other ADU types, which effectively are new or converted detached ADUs. The city may want to consider continuing prohibiting short-term rentals for both ADUs and JADUs, requiring the rental of an ADU be for a term longer than 30 days, as currently required by our local ordinance. Should the council want to permit short-term rentals, it would need to be included as part of a code amendment and removed from the existing ordinance.
But if our intention is for it to only have terms over 30 days, we don't have to make any amendments. That would already apply.
No, we would default to our local ordinance.
The local ordinance says it has to be
I
more.
should say the local ordinance is not in conflict with the state, so we can, the local ordinance stands.
That any rentals have to be more than 30 days.
Yes.
Okay.
Currently, all ADUs and JADUs are required to, are prohibited from having short-term rental terms.
Thank you.
SB 13 provides a pathway for homeowners to delay compliance with certain building code requirements that do not relate to health and safety. This would legalize many already existing ADUs that cannot be brought to 100% code compliance. The city currently has 19 active cases for unpermitted ADUs. 14 of these cases don't have health and safety concerns nor non-conforming zoning conditions, and therefore are eligible for a 5-year deferral. 3 of the cases appear to have non-conforming zoning conditions, such as setback or floor area violations, and 2 of the cases do have health and safety violations, but are eligible for the enforcement deferral once those health and safety violations are resolved. In essence, all of these cases would be permitted to remain under the provisions of the new state law and could be added legally to our housing stock. So in terms of staff recommendations, we have a few questions and recommendations. So I suppose that we'll just work through these and I'm available for comment or questions as we work through these. So the question is, should the city increase the exempted minimum by right ADU square footage provision from 800 square feet up to 1,200 square feet?
Philip, can I ask you how many questions there are?
There's 8.
Okay, 8 questions.
There's 8 questions.
That's good. That's a defined universe. I appreciate it. Go ahead.
So I would just suggest we just take it, the first 2 questions, take them slide by slide, or do you want to work through?
As you go through the 8 the first time,
Yeah.
if the council has questions, we'll ask our questions. Then we'll go to public comment. When we bring it back, we'll go through the 8 again and give you our final comments.
Okay, so you want me to work through these then? Just read through these.
Just quickly.
Got it.
Thank
Okay. Number 2, should the city limit the size of an ADU to 800 square feet when both an ADU and JADU would exist on the same lot? Should the city defer to the state statute for building height, which is at least 16 feet, or study alternative building height or other objective standards? Should the city consider amending the zoning code to accommodate more flexible off-street parking standards? In essence, wider driveways for lots with an ADU or JADU?
Can we ask questions as we go along? Okay.
Yep.
Can you go back to that previous slide? So I have some confusion about the height restriction. It is that the city must allow an ADU to be 16 feet. Yes. And so your question is, at this point, would the council like to see it higher than that?
Correct.
Okay.
Or establish a alternative building height for ADUs.
We currently have
separate from the underlying zoning district's requirements.
the underlying zoning district requirement is 24.
24. For instance, in an R1 zoning district, it's 24 feet to plate. So would the council be interested in developing an alternative building height standard for ADUs that are separate and apart from the underlying zoning districts?
Does that clarify it, Diane?
Except that the state tells you you cannot make it anything shorter than 16
Correct.
feet.
So it establishes the baseline, but the
That's what I was getting.
Yeah. Actually, if I could cut in for a second, Mayor. The report actually states it both ways. It says that a maximum building height of 15 feet in one part, and then it says no more or no less than 16 feet in another part. So it's a little confusing. But yeah, 16 is what the state is saying is the minimum, as I understand it. And we have a 24-foot standard.
Sorry, did you say the report stated that or the law?
Yeah, the report states it both ways. Yeah.
Okay.
I found conflicting statements there.
Okay, I apologize. Then that's an error.
That's okay.
It's at least
It happens.
16 feet.
But it's 24 feet for the main structure.
Correct.
Right.
In an R1 zoning district, it's 24 feet to plate.
But when we're talking about ADU.
For ADUs, it's at least 16 feet.
Right, okay. And so then your recommendation is be careful about mitigating potential views, shade, privacy impacts, et cetera, if you're going.
Exactly.
Allow it to go higher
Right.
than what the state is telling you the minimum has to be.
Correct. Or should the council choose to, the city can simply default to the state requirements, which is at a baseline of 16 feet.
Got it, okay.
I have a question about the 16 feet. Would that be applied to top plate to bottom plate on just in the residential section? Because there's many ADUs that currently exist in San Mateo that are built on top of garages. So how would that be interpreted?
So you're talking about existing ADUs that would exceed that height?
Correct.
This wouldn't apply to them at all, would it?
Wouldn't apply to
Well,
them.
it wouldn't apply to them, but I'm saying that that format of an ADU on top of a garage already exists in our community. And so it already in some ways sets a standard for height. And so I'm curious where the 16 feet starts and stops.
Well, it's a good question. The state doesn't actually specify how building height is measured. But in that particular instance, it wouldn't be an issue because we would be presuming that's a legally permitted ADU, constructed ADU. Should the council or should the city adopt an alternative height standard, that building would simply become a legal non-conforming structure.
Can I ask the other question I think that the council member was getting at, which is we currently measure height from the ground, from grade, to the bottom of the roof line.
Right.
Is that
what's
another way
considered
of
top
saying
of
it
plate.
for
Top of the top plate.
For a
Top plate.
layperson? Okay, but for a layperson?
But
Is
she's
that
okay
which
to
the
say that-
rafters sit on?
But
and the sheetrock
Councilmember
hangs
Lee
on.
is asking about existing structures. And if those existing structures were already permitted to be 24 feet, that's the way it's going to stay.
That's the way they're going to be legal non-conforming structures.
That's what I figured.
But I am also asking the question as we move forward, if we have this model in our existing housing stock, that's a proven model that exists, that people have already built, how we could interpret the 16 feet moving forward, knowing that this is already in place and it could be replicated and potentially is a more efficient use of a footprint.
Theoretically, we could pick anything between 16 and 24.
Correct.
Thank you.
You can also differentiate between an attached ADU and a detached ADU. So that's also something to consider if you wanted to make it higher for an attached ADU, like on top of a garage, versus up to 16 feet for a detached ADU. There's options.
That'll be question 3C. I think you're on number 5.
Okay. Should the city consider impact fees for ADUs and JADUs and conduct a nexus study? Number 6 would be, should the city develop objective design standards for ADUs or JADUs? And finally, does the city council want to continue prohibiting short-term rentals for all ADUs and JADUs? And does the city council want to consider provisions for permanent amnesty to allow existing illegal non-conforming ADUs to remain in perpetuity?
Okay, so that having been said, are there any final comments before we go to public comment?
Yes, one more question,
More
Mr. Mayor.
questions, thank you.
I think there's one more thing that we need to see so that the public can be aware of this before we go farther. If you can go back to your slide number 3, regarding the 16-foot plate height versus 20 or 24, I want to show something. Slide 3. Okay, so if you have a existing one-story garage and you want to add a second story to it, so typically the first floor is 8 feet. It's maybe a foot above grade because you got to get up that far by code. Then you got to have an 8-foot inner space. Then you got to have a joist space to support the upper floor. It's another foot. Okay, so you've got 10 feet there already. To get a normal height, you have to have at least 18 feet to the ceiling above, right? So if you don't have that, if you only have 16 feet, you have to do what they did on, you see the internal roof, or even on the lower left, or on the top left or lower left.
Reduce.
Either way, yeah, on the lower left, right there, that's fine. Let's say that's a garage building and you're adding an ADU in the second floor above. So you see where those windows are? That's what you would have. You would have your living space inside of the roof space. You would have maybe dormers, maybe skylights to get light in there, but it wouldn't be a normal living space. If you allowed at least 20 feet, then you could have a normal living space. If you did our city standard 24 feet, then you have room to maybe have higher ceilings or something, but we still need to discuss other things like privacy and so forth.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question.
Councilmember Lee?
If we could go back to the slide with question number 1.
Sure. That was slide 127.
Okay. So in terms of looking at the size and the number of bedrooms, I was wondering if we have just some contextual background information about our BMR program, so our below market rate program. How many people do we have on wait lists for 3 bedrooms?
I can answer that, Philip.
Great.
So on our existing wait list, we have 600 people on the total wait list, of which 100 are on the wait list for 3-bedroom units currently.
Okay. And I recall that we recently heard from Mid-Penn that they have over 600 people on their wait list for 3 bedrooms. Does anyone confirm that?
That's what they said to us during the presentation.
Yeah, I don't remember. I don't know if Kathy would remember that.
Okay.
I believe that that's what they quoted, and that's their wait list for all their properties.
Okay, not just specific to San Mateo.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe we have 2 members of the public who would wish to speak during the public comment period, so I would invite them up at this time for 3 minutes each.
First speaker is Karina Sarnoff, followed by Sean Forbrook. Oh, thank you, Karina.
Welcome.
Hello. I'm a builder, broker, developer of ADUs and JADUs, and it was good to see some council members there on Thursday, and including staff, at the Home for All event. I was also at the first one in 2018, so shared a table with Amarants. In regards to the remaining areas of discretion and recommendations for the City Council, let's keep it simple. No impact fees, hard cap at 850 square feet. And that's kind of like what the City of Burlingame has adopted. There's a big gray area as left by the new ADU laws, which after 800 or 850 square feet, there's the ability to impose impact fees. I had a long discussion with Philip on Friday, and he's recommended that no impact fees, but with allowing that's at keeping the square foot or the footprint of the ADU at 850 square feet for detached units. Regarding whether or not to prohibit short-term rentals, I would recommend that incentives be provided to property owners who have ADUs and JADUs, and encourage property owners to execute 1-year leases in return for BMR housing. 1-year leases also gives BMR tenants peace of mind and stability, and also falls in line with the new SB 1482 requirements. Regarding your height requirements, I would also adopt an ordinance similar to the one Burlingame has, and just not allow 2-story ADUs. Make it simple. And the reason being is because it's a fire code. So people living in ADUs and accessory dwelling units and normal primary residence, they have to have an escape route in case there is a fire in their living quarters. ADUs can't, like if you convert a basement into an ADU, you have to have a window So that's why a lot of basements can't be converted over into an ADU, because they don't necessarily have windows to escape from in their living quarters or the sleeping quarters.
30 seconds, yeah.
So it's a fire issue, but it's a life safety issue. So I mean, you're gonna probably have to deal with, if you do 2 stories, if you allow 2-story ADUs, you're gonna have the same problems that Redwood City is having right now in litigation. And this being an ministerial process, well, it wasn't a ministerial when those people that built ADUs on top of their garages back in 2019 submitted their plans, and now they're still in litigation because they're stuck because it wasn't ministerial back then, and they didn't conform. Essentially, the planning department wasn't talking to the building department and didn't conform to building codes and requirements. Also,
Thank you very
fire.
much.
So,
Appreciate it. Your time is up.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Next speaker is Sean Fairbrook, followed by William Huth.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Brennan, that was a nice presentation. So I've been following this process for a while now, as some of you know. And as we go through the items there, could you please go down to, I think it was items 4 and 5. I forget exactly what it was. Next one, please. There we go. So there's 2 things on this slide I want to ask questions about. And so the city developed objective design standards. And I think you all, those of you who have visited my house and my future JDU, you know what I'm scared about. I'm scared about limitations on kitchens and specifics of things that, really are not, they make no sense. So right now, this is not an ordinance yet. This is still in the creation process. And, perhaps you could speak after I'm done speaking about what the rest of the process is for how this gets tracked along, because I do kind of want to, pay attention to the devil in the details here as this gets going forward. Some of the other questions I have is about, you made a statement about the FAR and how some of the ADUs, it's kind of a backdoor to an increase in the FAR, if I heard you correctly for some of the scenarios there. Let me just pause and ask, did I capture that correctly?
I know what you're saying. And
Yeah, could you be more specific?
Okay, I'm not sure if it was on the by right ADU or if it was the detached ADU, but was there a provision where the combined FAR was actually in excess of what the standard FAR is?
Correct.
Okay, so my follow-on question to that is, for the JDUs, to encourage JDUs, could the city council consider, for lack of a better, a credit back to the primary residence, where if you dedicate, say, 500 feet to a JDU, that you get 250 square feet that you can tack basically a credit to your FAR? Is there something like this that could be considered in this? Because you're giving up space for the benefit of housing, and it'd be nice if you could recapture a little bit of that. What's fair is fair. It'd be nice to have. Another comment I have on the fees is. It sounded like I heard a back door there for some increased fees if the square footage was less than 800 square feet, where you were thinking about looking at the size of the primary residence. And I guess I'd kind of ask how, the logic of this, because obviously you're going to have a relatively large house if you can afford a JDU or an ADU. And this seems like kind of a backdoor to a very not so well-defined fee that it could really get kind of expensive pretty quick for some people. I think that's where I'm going to stop at this point. My biggest concern is I just don't want to see unreasonable constraints like in the last law, which we unfortunately forfeited. Thank you.
Thank you.
And last speaker is William Huth.
Hello, Bill Huth, 35 16th Avenue. Thank you, Phil, for all the information. I've been kind of researching it, and I think you confirmed a lot that I've been looking into. And what my question is, it's actually the height question I think that has come up, and it seems like it's unclear. That was the thing that my research I couldn't find. I just looked at both documents, and it seems like they both say 16 feet maximum, by the way, and not minimum. But it's okay. I mean, my question is, I'm trying to get clarity because I'm interested in an ADU that might be 2 stories. So is it the plate line? Is it the peak height? It sounds like a lot of things are exempt, setback. I don't know if daylight plane, I heard you mention the privacy windows and stuff, so I'd like to get more information on two-story and be interested in see how that comes out. That's the hardest thing to find with all the online information.
Thanks very much for your question.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. So we have a few questions to answer there. Is there any more public comment? Nope. So we'll close the public comment period, bring it back to the council, and I want to start by answering the questions that we got there. So,
sure. To be clear, the reference to the maximum height is simply an error in the staff report. The state specifies that an ADU is to be at least 16 feet in height. The only time the state code actually prescribes a height with no flexibility is when an ADU is being built on a multifamily development. It specifies 16 feet. Should the council adopt that limiting provision regarding when you're constructing a JADU and an ADU in addition to a primary residence, that would limit the height limit of that ADU to 16 feet as well. Should the council not choose to adopt that condition, then it can be, it can be up to 24 feet or whatever the underlying zoning district is.
can I ask a funny question? So, suppose somebody builds an ADU in their backyard, and they do such a nice job, and they like it so much, they move to the backyard in the ADU, and they rent out the front. There's no reason they can't do that, right?
They can certainly do that.
Okay. Now, can we go back to his questions? Was there more clarification you think you could add? So he asked one question, which was, is there a backdoor into adding fees to a residence based on how big it is? I think we answered the question, which is you definitely can go above the FAR if you are adding the minimum size ADU.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm following the question.
I think that was regarding the language about proportional in relation to the size of the existing dwelling.
Primary dwelling.
Yeah.
Primary dwelling.
In which we don't know the answer to right now. Right?
Yeah, I'm sorry I don't. There's just not much more information provided
Is that
by
right,
the
Mr.
state.
Fahrenbrook?
Sure.
I actually had 3 questions, but on that particular question, it was, would the city council consider, and I don't believe this is in the language right now, would the city council for the JDUs, as an incentive for people to create JDUs, consider adding language into an ordinance that would give back a flooring credit so that they could basically get a slightly larger FAR allowance? That was the other thing. And the other thing I want to know is, as far as how, as a citizen, do I track the creation of the law for the devil of details of how this thing develops?
But you also mentioned fees.
Yes.
And you said you thought you heard a backdoor.
Yeah,
Was
because
that
I
with
heard
regard to this?
I heard an item in there in Mr. Brennan's presentation that if the square footage is less than a certain amount, then the city may have the discretion to look at the size of the primary residence for the fees. Did I capture that correctly?
I think that's counter to the intent of what we're talking about.
I may have misunderstood you.
Sure. So the state law specifies that if an ADU is less than 750 square feet, impact fees, it's exempt from impact fees. Only when an ADU is more than 750 square feet would impact fees, or could impact fees be applied, and then it would be proportional to the size of the primary dwelling.
In that case, I withdraw my question. So it sounds like it's never, if you have a small place, they never look at it.
Yeah.
I think I misunderstood the statement.
Okay, good. I'm glad we got some clarification there. Councilmember Rodriguez.
So I have a question for what I believe was Mr. Fahrenbrook's third question, and this is something that I know I've traded emails with staff for a while now. In the code, especially for whatever reason for JADUs, there seems to be like restrictions that seem to make no sense, like how big your counter could be in your kitchen, and it has to be no more than like 16 inches or something like that. And there's a lot of little things like that that are just really, they don't make any sense, they're annoying. Is when we're looking over it again, are we going to be addressing some of those things?
No, you won't need to because the update to the state law actually removes that requirement, those requirements.
Great, thanks.
Can you define R1 for me?
R1 is low-density, single-family zoning.
What would R2 be?
Low-density, multifamily. Duplexes would be allowed on an R2.
What would R3 be?
Triplex?
I believe that's medium-density zoning. It allows for certain densities greater than 2 units.
Has the state...
Based on lot size, yeah.
Has the state legislature, in effect, created a system where there is no R1 and there is no R2?
Some would argue, yes.
We're here. Okay. Other questions from council members? Or should we just go through the questions starting with number 1?
Yeah.
Let's start with number 1.
To take a position?
Yes. So the question is straightforward. Is there any desire to limit the ADUs to 800, or does anyone believe that 1,200 is just not have limits at all?
I'm good with the staff recommendation.
Which is up to 1,200 square feet?
Yeah.
Up to 1,200?
Because we have some large lots.
Up to 1,200, up to 1,200?
I'm in favor of doing the by right 800 square feet and studying a tiered increase up to 1,200 square feet.
That's the recommendation.
Yes. my only sort of amendment or change would be to consider in the study increasing the number of bedrooms. I do believe that 1,200 square feet is sufficient to accommodate 3 bedrooms, and given certain circumstances and procedural analysis baked in, I think that we could figure out a way to right size a 3-bedroom, small, 1,200 square foot ADU, and what I hear in the room is people wanting flexibility, and I think that there's an opportunity to study for that.
Can I ask a different question?
I just have a question about the tiered. You would tier it based upon the size of the lot to begin with, right?
Correct. That's what we have in mind.
To study tiering it based on the size. Because with 4-foot setbacks as we have now, I mean, my feeling is if a lot ain't that big and then you're putting 1,200 square feet on it, it really is changing. It'd be tough. And I applaud the interest certainly in greater bedrooms, because a lot of our below market rate housing doesn't necessarily have enough bedrooms, but I worry about sticking one on a small lot. So I'd like to, if we're going to look at it,
so
that's
there are
kind of
thousands of larger lots, though.
Yeah, I just want you to know what my reservations are on that one.
Eric?
So just a clarifying question on this. I'm fine with the recommendation, but when we say we're going to study it, does that mean like comprehensive, going out to the community and getting their feedback and hearing what they have to say, not only those that want to have provide this housing, but also those that have concerns about other things such as parking?
That would definitely be part of it. It'd also look at, we'd analyze our available data in terms of determining what types of lots we have in the city. Would also probably include a peer review of what other cities may have done in terms of similar tiered structures.
Great, thank you.
I think we've covered number 1,
Well,
yes?
I would like to support also studying up to 3-bedroom units.
I think that you're hearing that from more than 3 of us, that it really doesn't matter. I mean, whether they call that third room a bedroom or not, we're talking about up to 3 bedrooms or whatever it is, especially since there's a serious demand for that. So let's move on to number 2.
Well, wait, can I just hold on one second? Yeah, I mean, for my purposes, you'd have to have the additional square feet for the 3 bedrooms. I think it's really hard in 800 square feet. That's pretty tough.
No, but 1,200 could.
1,200.
Yeah, only in the 1,200. Okay, sorry, it went a little faster. Okay, thanks.
And I would just add that in the study process, I would love the staff to come back with some recommendations on ways that that we can expedite this process internally and save time and also cost to the residents. And also have noticing requirements. And I think that there is a way to do that through the zoning administration and not going through the planning department. So I would be in favor of including that provision in the study process.
Kohar? I think Kohar wants to chime in. Forgive me.
So
Phil?
there's a couple things that we can consider. We can either allow it by right, which means you write the ordinance in such a way that if it's based on a tiered lot size, that it would just be permitted and they'd go straight in for a building permit. Or you could require the by right by 800 square feet, which is the state minimum, and then anything between 800 and 1,200 square feet could go through some kind of approval process. So there's kind of different options and ways we can look at it, and I would be interested in hearing what the council's perspective would be. Would you want to write an ordinance that would allow by right by tier, or would require a process between 800 and 1,200 square feet? Because I think that makes a big difference.
Can I ask a question before we answer that, which is, if we make it too hard, aren't they just going to build it anyway, and then they'll come back for us, and we're not going to be, based on this ordinance, we can't tell them to tear it down, right? That's the way that the state wrote their ordinance, so.
The state is only a deferral of enforcement. It's not an excuse. You're not excused from compliance. The city can, that they requested, the city has to defer enforcement for 5 years. And then that statute also expires in I think, 2025.
Okay, but they get 5 years to bring it, so we can't tell them to do anything to it for 5 years. They get 5 years to come up to code or whatever.
That's right.
Okay.
There's an exception in there too, because if there are health and safety concerns, then you don't have to wait 5 years.
Okay. But my point is, if we make it onerous to get through this process, they're not going to come in for a permit. So we want them to come in.
It's actually one of the later questions.
To speak to the zoning administrator.
Were you just suggesting that whatever we study comes right back to us? Or were you suggesting the actual application process?
I was suggesting that when the staff comes back with a recommendation, that they consider the cost and speed.
Right, that's what I thought you were talking about. Okay. She's not talking about the ultimate application process. She's talking about this process in creating law.
But I think what Kohar is asking is for a clarification of, do we do tiers by right, or or do we do 800 square feet plus studied for tiers with a special use permit?
And the difference would be that if you did it by special use permit or some kind of zoning administrative approval, there would be a noticing component to that, whereas if it's by right, it would go straight to building permit, and there would be minimal noticing, if any, provided to the neighborhood. So that's something I would consider, because I think some homeowners might be a little concerned if all of a sudden a 2-story structure really close to the property line was built in their neighbor's backyard.
Eric?
Yeah, so just to answer your question, I really think these state laws are going to do a lot of good in our city, and they're going to allow us to build more housing. But I do think that there could be, I think there's going to be a shock to the system, especially a lot of the quality of life issues that we get calls on every single week. And so my approach, I would probably prefer to be a little bit more cautious. And obviously we do the minimum the state requires, but if we're going to be going above and beyond that, which in some cases it sounds like we're going to probably want to do, that in those cases, I would probably prefer that those above and beyond not be by right and be a little bit more traditional, let neighbors talk about it. And so if you want to do the minimum, go for it, and you're encouraged. But if you start going above that and you got 2 stories, you might be looking in somebody's window, that's where I think we need to proceed with a little bit of caution.
Okay. I think we're done with number 1, right? Okay.
Nobody else answered the question?
Yeah, nobody else answered.
Well,
she's asking a question.
So I would say by right exemption of 800 square feet and a studied tier for anything above that, including up to 3 bedrooms, excuse me.
Okay, and then we can look into providing some options for increased notification above the tiered while keeping it as streamlined as possible. We can talk to our city attorney's office to see how we can make that work if possible.
Great.
Thank you.
Maybe through some objective standards.
Okay, number 16. Go ahead.
The question is, should the city limit the size of an ADU to 800 square feet when both an ADU and JADU exist on the same lot? So we're talking about that triplex situation.
I think other people have already mentioned, we have some really big lots. There are really big lots, and there are different reasons. You may have an elder grandparent that you're taking care of in a JADU, and you may have a mother-in-law who needs to live as far in the backyard as possible, and there are lots in San Mateo where that might be accommodated.
I think the reservation that was suggested by council was you could have up to 8 adults living on a property. Isn't that what you had said? So that's the concern. It's not necessarily lot size on that one. It's the concern that you could have with a JADU and an ADU upwards of 8 working adults in one particular lot.
Right.
Right?
Right. I think our concern is in our single-family zoning districts, as you mentioned, shock to the system if you have a couple of triplexes built next to you. I know that we all envision ADUs to serve, to house our grandparents or whatnot, but I think there is a reality where you have investors or homeowners that will, especially given the fact that there is not a owner occupancy requirement, that are renting out these units and are trying to maximize their profits by, putting in as many bedrooms as they can.
Well, can I speak to that? I mean, I think that the market speculation is going to be there regardless, regardless of whatever policy we adopt. And when I was looking at our city data, it seems to me that that our average household size has been relatively stable at 2.4 to 2.6 in the last 18 years, and that we have we have a number of households that are seniors living in large homes that are looking to downsize into smaller units. And the footprint of a JADU is built within the wall structure, right, within the footprint of the existing primary residence. So it's not a net new. Is that correct?
Well, correct, but this specific question is regarding that limiting provision or condition where if you had this triplex situation, you could limit that ADU, that detached ADU, to 800 square feet. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if they had enough allowance, development allowance on their lot, they could build a 1,200 square foot detached
My
ADU. feeling
would be there's an advantage in sort of folding this question into this tiered study.
Mm-hmm.
As an example, if it's a 10,000 square foot lot and it has a 2,000 square foot main residence with an 800 square foot JADU, you could add a 1,200 square foot detached ADU without going over your 50% FAR, right?
True.
And the question is, in that scenario where it's a 10,000 square foot lot and a 2,800 main residence, do you want to limit it to 800 square foot detached ADU? That's the question, yes?
Yes.
Okay. And your answer is no, and I want to give other people a chance to answer that question.
My answer is yes. I would like to see it limited because I worry about 9 adults in one setting. I think that really changes the character for the neighbors around. So we have to be conscious of both sides.
Yeah, so I agree with the staff's recommendation and Councilmember Pappen. Like I said before, we are kind of going into uncharted territory, and the lot sizes that you're talking about, Mayor Goethals, is basically San Mateo Park, but almost all other lots in San Mateo are significantly smaller, and so I'm fine I'm fine with looking at it, but I think that, like, going into this, we need to really be cautious on this because it could really exacerbate the parking issues.
So I disagree. I say no. And it's because two things. One is I think the situation where you end up with 8 adults is extreme, and we're not going to see that very often because people naturally kind of limit how many people live in one place. I don't think every single investor is going to round up that many people to put into his residence, JADU, ADU. But the other thing is, if you do have the space to build all that, you also have the space for off-street parking. And I think that most people that have, because I remember a lot in San Mateo Park where it was so big, it was like 15,000 square feet. They subdivided it and sold the back half and built another house back there, right? And I think that was like a 3,000 square foot house. So these things have been getting done just different ways, and we haven't seen negative impacts from them.
So in that vein, let me ask this. So that same 10,000 square foot house that has a 2,500 square foot main house, they want to build a pool house. Is there any reason they can't build a 2,000 square foot pool house?
Well, so they would be governed by the floor area allowance for the given lot.
Yeah.
So that floor area would look at the primary residence, the JADU, I guess you were saying in this scenario?
Sure.
Any accessory structures, sheds, storage areas, things of that nature. So it all goes into one pot. So that would be the limiting or governing sort of aspect to how much they could build.
The pool house is not exempt from meeting the floor area requirements. And our zoning code does stipulate how much you can build on a lot. A pool house would not fall into the same exemption category, but an ADU would. So you could have a pool house that is, I don't know, 1,500 square feet, if the lot is big enough and the floor area is permissible on site.
Is the concern that they would
Convert it.
Well, I'm trying to look at this practically, that if somebody wanted to build a 1,200 square foot structure in the back of their house and rent it out, we actually couldn't limit that so long as they were in the FAR,
Yes.
correct?
No.
If they took a pool house, made it into a home, now you have 2 homes on a
Yes.
single family zone.
Isn't it an ADU?
Depends, not if you're limited to 800 feet. It's 1,200 feet.
Could they designate 800 feet of it as an ADU?
Potentially.
Yes.
That's a recommendation.
But the pool house is not a residence.
Okay, I hear you, and it didn't take me 3 minutes to figure out a way around this code. So it seems to me a distinction without a difference. And I completely appreciate that this is going to be a shock to everyone's system, which is why I asked the question about R1s, R2s, and R3s. I'm shocked that we don't have 300 people in the room right now because the state has come in and dramatically changed our neighborhoods in ways that people are not ready for. But it's to address the housing crisis that we all are partially to blame for. And so I think we're going to have to start talking to all of our residents about this. This is, I appreciate that most of the lots, as Eric said, are not going to be able to add more than 800 square feet anyway, so it may be a moot point.
And just one thing I wanted to say, I agree with Mayor Goethals that I think that if the community really knew how important of these conversations we're having right now and how it can affect every single neighborhood and how much housing it could add to our housing supply, I think we would have 300 people here. And I think that this is something I didn't get a single email or a single call on. I don't think the community really knew what was at stake. So this says when we do these studies, we really need to get the community involved. We need to be talking to neighborhood associations. We need to be having the different pop-up things where people can get their opinions
taken.
If I may, I think this is going to come up quite a bit. It's how you do it. And everybody concedes that there's a housing shortage, and everybody concedes that ADUs are a real great place to do infill, no question about it. I just want us, I echo Councilmember Rodriguez, let's make sure that we hit that balance. That's all that's being said here. So we really do have to be very careful about how we do it, but those premises that there is a housing shortage and ADUs or JADUs are a great way to do that infill or provide for your aging parent, as one of our speakers has been talking about. These are fantastic ways to do it. Let's just, as a council, be very conscious that there might not be voices in the room, that this may be very difficult for neighborhoods that don't have these big lots, whatever it is. We have to keep that in mind as we go forward. And nobody's disputing a housing shortage here. No one.
Okay. To the mayor.
Hold on for 1 second. We're on number 2. We have 2 yeses and 2 nos. I'm going to say no. And part of my logic here is it is pretend that we are able to do anything about this. At this point, all the ADUs in the world can be built, all the JADUs can be built, and our neighborhoods could be dramatically changed, and there really is nothing we can do about it. We are on the fringes of the details when we're talking about this conversation right now. With
Just
that
one
having
last thing.
been said,
Well,
I think we can move.
I think staff has shown us where we can impact those areas, and they may be just the difference that take a neighborhood to a tipping point. So you're right. The bulk of it is provided for in state statutes, no question about that. But let's give ourselves an opportunity on those fringes to make sure that we're doing it right.
I think giving ourselves an opportunity to do it right is, the path forward, which I think there is strong support for, is doing the studied tiers that takes into the context into account,
which we all agree on.
And and so maybe there's an opportunity here to fold some of these other questions into the study opportunities.
On number 2, you have 2 yeses and 3 nos.
Mr. Mayor, I have to add something.
If you must.
Yeah, I just want to say, I think we've kind of talked ourselves into an excited level over what could happen, right? So there's nobody saying, I mean, right now there is pent-up demand, and the state has lowered the bar, and people are going to bite. They're going to want to build some of these, but that demand is not going to last forever. There will be a wave of this activity, and then it's going to slow down, right? There are the people who want to do it and those who don't. And I think probably most people don't really want to have another house in their backyard. Tell you the truth. Okay, so I'm not against public input. Let's let the public hear it.
I totally
but let's
agree.
don't get too excited about what we think could happen at the extremes. That's all.
Okay.
Thanks.
Number 3.
Should the city defer to the state statute for building height, that being at least 16 feet, or study alternative building height or other objective standards?
Can I start? Yeah.
Sure, Ray.
Thank you. So 16 feet doesn't really allow you to have a 2-story thing unless you build a structure that's going to have a sloped roof with living space in the roof. Okay. I think some lots are big enough to have 2-story structures. And I think this is something we should look at, because if you have a small lot and you're right next to your neighbors, 2 stories right up against them is something that needs to be looked at. Although there are mitigations for that. There are obscured windows. There are clear story windows, which are up higher. If you're up on the 2nd floor, you can have windows that are up higher so you can't really see down into the neighbor's yard. Main focus. And you can even have windows like double hungs that are half obscured and half clear, right? There's all sorts of ways to do that. You can have light and not be looking in the neighbor's backyard. But the main concern, I think, is shadows and imposing structures right up close to your if you have a single family home. Right now, I got to tell you, my neighbor's dining room looks right into my bedroom and vice versa. People have lived like that for years, okay? So you use some window coverings. And
Is your response to number 3 yes?
yes, my response to number 3 is yes. I just want to make sure that we allow for up to 24 feet in height, because there are, like I say, big lots. Some people might want to convert their garage. You'll need 24 feet.
Okay. Same square footage standards, but you would go above the 16 to 24
Yes.
feet in some circumstances.
Yes.
It has to be at least 16, right? Right. Okay. Anyone else want to chime in on number 3?
I'll chime in. I think that, in the case that we were just discussing where there's a pre-existing garage and people are very concerned, rightly so, about parking, the opportunity to build on top of a garage and preserve that existing parking is to everyone's benefit. And so I really see maintaining the 24-foot height as a nod to form-based code. It's aligned with what's already in place, and it will preserve existing parking.
Versus the alternative, which allows you to build a one-story and get rid of parking.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably a good point. It may create other issues with foundation, but that's probably a good point. Anyone else want to chime in on number 3? Eric?
Yeah, I definitely think that we should look into creating a maximum height. But I do think, I think that if we're going to look above this, we're going to have some pretty stringent objective standards that are really taking into account the neighbors. And I think there's ways we could do it possibly higher that doesn't affect anybody, but there's also ways that it can create a lot of issues. So it's
You
really
do setbacks and other things.
yeah, the devil's in the details in this one. So it's easy on all these to say, yeah, we'll study it, but this one's going to be a tough one, I think. And I did follow what was going on with Redwood City, and that was just a big mess. And the neighborhoods came out in full force. And I think that we have to have that level of dialogue when we start talking about this.
I agree that increased height should come with objective standards that mitigate impacts on neighbors. So I'm a yes. I think that's 4 yeses. Diane, do you have a?
No, I'm fine with it.
Okay, number 4.
Should the city consider amending the zoning code to accommodate more flexible off-street parking standards? For example, wider driveways for lots with ADU or JADUs.
So
When you
I have something on this. I do have concerns about cement. I don't mind some additional off-street parking, but my preference would have it be either crushed rock or something, because otherwise it just creates runoff, and we want to do our part for greenscapes.
Yep.
So if you do that and decide that, that's my only, little twist on it.
Some sort of permeable paver.
Exactly. That
Right.
happened a lot in San
Agreed.
Francisco, and they have
Pervious
so
pavers.
much
Great idea.
runoff.
That's a good
We
point.
want to, capture groundwater.
Right.
I've been asking this question for a few years, and it's been my understanding that our current code does not allow people to increase the parking space in their front yard. It doesn't allow for paving more than a certain number of square feet in your front yard, and so residents really aren't able to add parking that they otherwise would add and take cars off of the street. So I would encourage us to do that. In my mind, it would be widening the curb cuts, having at least 2 side-by-side cars, and encouraging people to put on their trash day, putting all the cans behind the cars in the driveway, so that it's not taking up the parking spaces on either side of the driveway. I think we should almost adopt that as an ordinance citywide, that people have to leave their cans in.
So moved.
So that you hit it when you go out in the morning?
Well, no, just, you can go around it or whatever, but I actually do that in my house, where after we leave, we put the cans in the parking lot so that people can park on the street during the day. One benefit of that is that you have to put the cans in before you park in the driveway when you get home. So it forces you to move them. Anyway, that was more than you asked for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree we should consider it, but I think we got to be careful with this, and we definitely got to get input from residents.
Agreed. Is there any objection to number 4? No, we want you to continue to work on this and bring us back some recommendations. more specific recommendations. Number 5?
Should the city consider impact fees for ADUs and JADUs and conduct a nexus study?
I'm not interested.
I'm not either, because I feel like the study would cost more than the money that we would get back from it over the next 50 years. It just, there's other ways to skin a cat, and if we want the money, let's not do the nexus study. But because in order to get the fee in this manner, we'd have to do a very extensive nexus study showing exactly what the impact is and only charge them for that impact. We could do this another way, and anyway.
Agree.
Anyone else?
Agree, drop the impact fees.
Number 6.
Should the city develop objective, should the council want to, we can actually skip this question. I think it's redundant with question number 4.
Agreed. Number 7.
Does the city council want to continue prohibiting short-term rentals for all ADUs and JADUs?
Yes.
Yes. Number 8.
Does the city council want to consider provisions for permanent amnesty to allow existing illegal non-conforming ADUs to remain in perpetuity?
It's fine by me.
I have a comment.
Well, can you finish reading the staff recommendation?
Staff recommends preparing provisions for permanent amnesty to allow the existing ADUs to remain in perpetuity, regardless of noncompliance to zoning and building code standards, provided the ADUs meet health and safety considerations.
Does that cover your comment?
No, it doesn't. It's exactly my consideration, which is it would allow substandard electrical, which could cause a fire at any time, to remain in place. Also, those houses haven't been built to any kind of seismic standards. We don't know how they're built. We get an earthquake, they fall down on the people. And it catches fire and blows up because there's gas there too. So no, I don't support that.
But would that be the health and safety?
Do you want to give them a length of time?
Health and safety. Okay,
You give
this
them a
is
length of
safety.
time to comply then? Is that where you are?
Yes.
What time do you think is reasonable?
I think 5 years.
I'm confused.
Yeah. Isn't the staff recommendation incorporate what you just said? Because it says that
No.
provided the ADUs meet health and safety considerations, what you were talking about, those ADUs did not.
I don't think is that what was meant? That because to provide this kind of health and safety consideration, they need to be inspected in order to remediate.
Right, and maybe Kohar can respond to that, but I believe we're developing some sort of program or with our building department and code enforcement.
Yeah, so SB 13 allows for a 5-year deferral of code enforcement cases, so it doesn't mean that you're just off the hook on getting a permit. You just get 5 more years to comply. What we're asking you here is, do you want, instead of giving them just 5 years, allow them to be permitted after we do health and safety inspections? I mean, we would not allow for ADUs that don't have safe electrical or fire-rated walls.
So
or
there
any-
have to be inspections.
They would have
Yes.
to be inspected.
Yes,
and we would,
inspections.
Then I say yes.
This question is, should we put together a program? Or do you want to just default to the state and do the 5-year deferral? And then 5 years from now, those 19 illegal ADUs would have to either be, some of them would have to be torn down because there's no way they could meet the building code the way they're constructed.
We want the inspections. We want them to be safe. We want them to have health considerations.
And maybe we develop some kind of a program to help people with lower means be able to bring their places into compliance.
Money? You want money with it?
Yeah,
I don't know if I want money, but I'll give you perpetuity.
we'll take yours.
Well, and I would like a little refinement on this, that the building codes, the uniform building codes, that are all safety related. And there are some that are more imminent threats to health and safety, and they're treated differently under that deferral. We can't defer those for 5 years. But we can't also waive building code requirements. The building code, the uniform codes are a floor, not a ceiling. We can make them more restrictive, but make certain findings, but we can't waive them. So to the extent that this is an intention to make a amnesty for building code provisions, that's not something that we can do. And if we wanted to do it for zoning standards, then, so that now we're talking about situations where ADUs were added at some point in time. We'll have to figure out what that point in time is, in violation of zoning standards. If we're saying we want to allow those to continue, that's going to have to take a code amendment to our zoning code to make that, clear. That can be done, but not the building provisions.
So what I hear the council saying, and I'm going to give them all a chance to chime in, is that we are more than willing to work with people who have non-conforming ADUs at the moment and permit them, so long as they are inspected and they meet health and safety considerations and they're not completely outrageous. So the completely outrageous part is the part that we need further definition on. And I don't want to open this up to all the parameters under the building code, but we're willing to provide amnesty if they're safe and
As long as they're safe, I'm happy.
safe and reasonable. Good. Are we done?
We are done.
You're to be applauded. This was
Yes.
a lot of work, and
I don't know what
I
it
concur
says
with our
about whether Kohar likes you or not that she gave you this assignment, but you have done
has
an
confidence in
admirable
you.
have done an admirable job. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Mr.
I have to say major kudos to Philip and Gabrielle Whelan, our assistant city attorney, because the state did not make this easy.
No.
The laws conflicted with one another, and we're still trying to decipher them. So is HCD. So it's a good job.
Good work, and I think Councilmember Rodriguez is right. We have to be spreading the word and get lots of feedback, and people, the word is not out there. We need to educate them on what's coming and what the council actually has authority over anymore. With that having been said, thank you very much, Philip. The local historic markers advocates have been waiting patiently for their turn. We went past Cliff's bedtime, so apparently. So whenever someone gives their first presentation to the council, don't they have to do a song and dance? Yes. 3 maybe, yes. Right. Nope.
No.
Good evening. Welcome.
There we go. Good evening, Mayor Goethals and members of the City Council. My name is Samantha Weigel. I'm a communications analyst with the City Manager's Office, and I'm here to talk about historic markers in the public right-of-way. So there's going to be 2 parts to my presentation tonight. The first is to ask for your feedback and approval on a new City Council policy that would govern historic markers in the public right-of-way. The second part of tonight's discussion is about a preliminary proposal to commemorate the former Chingley Laundry building and business. On that section, we're just seeking council direction, and we do have Mr. Hansen here representing the Parks Foundation to speak to the proposal. So for a little bit of background, staff was approached with a proposal to install a marker in the public right-of-way at First Avenue in Claremont. While considering the proposal, we determined that the city does not currently have a clear process in place for reviewing this type of request, and we are recommending that City Council formalize the process. We decided this in part because, as we've seen across the nation, there have been debates related to historic monuments, as well as how public institutions were named. And so we do believe that what is commemorated in the public right-of-way should be reviewed and approved at the City Council level, not just left up to staff. I do want to clarify that this proposed policy only covers the public right-of-way, such as streets and sidewalks. It would not have an effect on markers on private property, in parks, or on buildings. Markers specifically on buildings are regulated by the city's sign ordinance. It also wouldn't have an impact on public art installations. We also feel that there are specific issues at hand for markers in the public right-of-way, knowing that the public right-of-way is typically an active space used by pedestrians and generally maintained by the city. The proposed policy, which is included as Attachment 1, outlines 5 evaluation criteria. This includes the historical significance, so is this a place of public interest, or does it represent a person or organization that has contributed to San Mateo's heritage? One area in which we're asking for feedback on is whether recognition of an individual should be made posthumously or after someone has passed. The proposal currently includes this. Second, the site is not currently marked, and it's within the right-of-way controlled by the city. So this wouldn't cover markers on, say, El Camino or public right-of-way that's controlled by the state. It must also conform with ADA or Americans with Disability Act standards, and funding is available. We do encourage that these be funded through private donations, but the council may decide to commit funding as well. We also suggest that these markers would become property of the city and that after they are installed, and we're looking for council feedback on whether the council supports the city taking on the responsibility and associated costs of installing and maintaining these markers. The proposed policy includes an approval process, which would involve individuals or organizations being able to propose a marker and working with staff to make sure it complies with policy. The council would then consider the proposal during a public meeting, which may include a 5-minute presentation by the person proposing the marker. Council could then approve the markers by adopting a resolution. The policy also includes a recommended preferred design for these markers. In general, staff do feel that it is best to encourage that these markers, when possible, be installed on private property and not in the public right-of-way. Please also note that while staff is recommending a preferred design type, the policy does give council discretion to approve markers that may be different than the preferred design type, and that's covered in Section C of the policy. So staff is recommending that we choose a preferred design, and this included what we're calling an in-ground marker that's made typically out of cast metal. This design was chosen for 3 key reasons. 1, it is less likely to conflict with active uses of public spaces. So that means it preserves existing pedestrian access and it won't impact sight distance for drivers, specifically meaning the visibility of pedestrians. It's also more likely to comply with ADA standards, and staff do believe that the in-ground markers will be easier to maintain in the long term. And this does include that they will be less likely to be vandalized than above-ground markers, and unfortunately, graffiti is a common issue in San Mateo. So here are a few examples of the proposed in-ground prototype that staff is recommending as a preferred alternative. They are typically made of metal, usually bronze, and they can be cast or engraved. I will note that while these markers are slightly more expensive, or they tend to be slightly more expensive than some of the other alternative, staff do believe that they're going to be more resilient and easier to maintain in the long run. There are also some different manufacturing techniques that allow for images and graphics to be captured, so we do feel that these can be used to tell a story and not necessarily just mark a spot. On the right is an example of one that was installed on private property in Palo Alto, which is being used to commemorate the Edgewood Shopping Center. Little piece of local history. It's one of the few commercial properties developed by Joseph Eichler. Staff did look at other types of markers. This included an above-ground marker that is usually made of enamel that's printed on steel in a standalone frame. We do often see these types of sort of interpretive plaques at parks, and I know Public Works recently installed one at Seal Point Park overlooking the wastewater treatment plant construction. However, staff felt that this was not the preferred design for the public right-of-way specifically because it is more likely to interfere with sight distance or how far drivers can see, generally takes up more space, could potentially be more likely to impede pedestrian access, and may need more evaluation to determine its compliance with ADA standards. Staff also felt this specific design could be more likely to attract vandalism and graffiti, and therefore could require some more ongoing maintenance. Another design considered was to essentially affix markers, whether they're made of metal or enamel printed on steel, and have them affixed to a standalone pole. Staff isn't recommending this design for similar reasons as the other above-ground plaque, and because it could require either a new pole be installed or to use an existing pole. We also felt that it's likely harder for people to read these than the other types. So now we're on to the second part of the presentation, where we are seeking council direction on a proposal to commemorate Shingley Laundry, which is at the corner of First Avenue and Claremont Street near downtown. The proposal comes from Fred Hansen on behalf of the city's Parks and Recreation Foundation. Just a little piece of history, and I know there's some more in the report, but the business opened in 1876 and was considered the oldest Chinese laundry in the entire United States when it closed in 2016. The area around the business served as an informal Chinatown in San Mateo and was a hub of the immigrant community before World War II. It is considered a testament to Chinese immigrants overcoming alienation, segregation, and discrimination to become Americans. This is the draft proposal Mr. Hansen has submitted. It includes text and a few images. Mr. Hansen is here tonight, and I know he's looking forward to speaking to you guys during the public comment period, and he's available to answer any questions that you may have. He has indicated that the foundation has raised approximately $3,000 for this marker. Mr. Hansen has proposed installing a marker across the street from the laundry in a brick bulb-out area at the intersection in front of 461 First Avenue, which would look out, or would be facing the former Chingley Laundry building. The proposal includes the above-ground interpretive plaque-style design, and it would be enamel printed on steel, approximately 36 by 24 inches in a standalone frame. Again, Mr. Hansen can speak more about his proposal during the comment section. Staff did raise some initial concerns about the above-ground format being installed at this particular location, and that did include potential impacts to drivers' abilities to see pedestrians. Staff did note that bulb outs are typically created as a pedestrian enhancement, and that this could potentially detract from that. And they did have some concerns about it being vandalized. In general, staff also felt that it's better when possible to not install these markers in an area that's paved by bricks because it's easier to install them when you're able to re-pour the concrete at the same time. But all that being said, I do want to note that even if council does adopt a policy with a preferred design, you still have the discretion to approve a marker of a different design. While this location may have additional space with the bulb out, we do feel that in general, in the policy, it would be best to have them be the in-ground format. And basically to choose a format that's as least intrusive as possible for active uses of the space. So we are seeking, again, council feedback and action on the policy, and then separately direction on the Chingley Laundry proposal. I have 2 slides outlining some questions for your consideration. Staff recommends that City Council approve the policy on historic markers in the public right-of-way. And we did, again, incorporate a few sections that you may wish to provide some more direction on. And reviewing other policies in other communities, some had requirements that individuals be recognized posthumously or after someone has passed. Does council support the preferred prototype design? And is council okay with the city taking on the responsibility and associated costs of installing and maintaining the markers? And then secondly, we're seeking direction on the draft Chingley Laundry proposal. So does council support commemorating the former Chingley Laundry? And does council support the marker design and location as currently proposed? Again, Mr. Hansen will be speaking about his proposal, and I'm happy to take any questions before or after comment.
How many questions are you asking us? Can we go back to the first ones?
I'm asking for feedback in 3 areas of the policy, the proposed policy, and for approval of the policy. And then I'm asking for feedback on 2 questions related to the draft proposal.
Okay, can we address your general questions first?
Yes.
So the first one is, should individuals be commemorated posthumously, or can they be commemorated posthumously?
It's currently written as should.
Okay.
And again, this was put in there, really, we saw it in other communities and thought this might be something that you would want to consider.
Anybody have comments on that? I'm not
be able to ask questions.
Yes, yes, please. Questions.
A question I have, and apologies if this was in the report, but when you're talking about the ongoing costs, so I know that there's an installation cost one time, but did you do any calculations on how much it would cost, like in perpetuity, to keep the different ones up?
So it would primarily, I think most of the maintenance costs would be to either refresh any needed sealant that would be put on, sort of an anti-graffiti sealant, and most of this would all be staff time. It would also be associated maintenance with cleaning the markers if they're vandalized. So it was difficult for us to put any firm numbers on that, knowing that it's staff time.
So cleaning them when they are vandalized?
If I should say if they are vandalized.
Okay, so we don't know how much this could cost for each one we do?
No.
Is there any range or anything like?
I don't have any specific numbers on that. Yeah.
That was the only question I had.
Mayor Goethals, if I could just comment, I think assuming they're kept in good condition and they're not vandalized, especially an in-ground one, we would expect it to be minimal, the maintenance to be very minimal. We think that something above ground would probably be a little bit more maintenance just because of the way it's constructed, but wouldn't be too much. But I think it would be a function of how it got treated by the public.
Right. Well, that's where I was kind of going in terms of like the overall lifetime cost of the different options, because I think we should take those into consideration, because when I do agree that Those above ground ones, you can just see somebody taking a key and just going like that, and then all of a sudden it's screwed up until we were able to fix it. So that, I mean, that could cost thousands and thousands of dollars more over 10 years than just on the plaque where people are walking over it. So that's what I was just getting at, and I think it's important to take that into account. And maybe, even though you'll never know, but just having a couple assumptions so we could compare them could be helpful.
Rick?
Do we have a proposed material for the in-ground? Because not all metals are the same. Some are soft. Brass is a soft metal. We're going to use an alloy that's harder, because regular wear and tear on that walking surface can wear a metal down.
Yeah, so what I've seen typically be used is bronze.
Bronze. Okay. Yeah.
Anyone else before?
Well, I had a question about the specific ordinance, or resolution, I should say. It says it would apply for public interest such as historic property, area of cultural significance, or location of historically significant event. And my question was, in the ordinance, are we considering our decision in any way against our stated values, like for example in the general plan update process or our city mission? Is there a place to integrate and reflect the consideration of each site based on our values?
If that was council's direction, we could incorporate that. In general, historic marker policies and programs are designed to be objective but also flexible. So if council wanted to direct us to take a look at the general plan's vision and values, we could potentially find a way to try to incorporate that. I do think that for the purpose of historic markers, what we've included in the policy right now does cover a lot and gives you guys flexibility to base your evaluation on those criteria.
Have we considered any size limitations for these things?
Not specific size limitations. When we did some evaluations, we were looking at something similar to what Mr. Hansen has proposed. But in general, I think we probably preferred something a little bit smaller, more about, I think we were looking at about 18 by 24 inches.
Yeah, good.
Yes.
I just like the idea that there would be consistency throughout town, and there might be, sort of ultimately a path of perhaps prominent sites. I know you're not looking for comments, but that was my thought. Was it sort of appealed to the idea of continuity? George Washington slept here, whatever it may be. I think it would be pretty cool. That's it.
Okay.
I do want to make sure Mr. Hansen has a chance to come up and talk about his
Fred?
proposal. And
Come on up, Fred. Thank you. Welcome.
It's nice to be back. It's been a long time for me.
But I see you Thursday nights in the park every summer, so it's nice to see you back in the council chambers, though.
Standing here, it's a hard time hearing you.
Okay, I'll speak up.
So I really couldn't hear your comment to me.
I was saying that it may be a long time since you've been back here, but I see you in the park so often. It doesn't seem like it's been a long time.
Yeah. Well, the last time I was here, other than for the recognition of San Mateo's birthday, the only person in this room who was actually a member of a staff or council was Sean Mason.
No, he's so old, isn't he?
Yeah.
Look what he did to his hair.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding, Sean. I'm just kidding.
No, you're getting as old as me. So I do have some comments about the policy before I ever get into my proposal. And one thing that really occurs to me is the choice of marker. Really, your message should choose the marker you want. When you looked at the 3 examples that were in there, they actually showed you different things. They were trying to give you different stories. And when you choose a marker and a size, you are limiting the story you're trying to tell or how the story is to be told. Because it didn't occur to me until I saw the picture with the American flag and the soldier that I would be putting my foot and heel on his face or that flag. And culturally, putting my face on my shoe on somebody's face doesn't appeal to me. So sometimes the message should drive what the marker looks like. There is a significant cost difference. Now, the one I propose runs around $3,500. When I first started, probably with inflation, it's probably up to $4,000. We've got that covered. But if I was to go for the same type of marker in bronze, we're talking about twice that cost. We're talking about $7,000 to $8,000. And because of the distance, if you notice, you read here and here, the letters have to be bigger. The marker is going to have to be bigger. The visibility is harder. So if you really want to commemorate something, you're going to have to change how to do it. Is it comfortable reading like this? No, it is not. There's a lot of content. There's a lot of message. You know, when we put this together, it was to deliver history, sense of what San Mateo is about, also to inspire people. That's thought, contemplation. So, you know, if I'm sitting back looking at a marker in the ground, a big marker, I'm blocking. I'm sorry. You know, if I was stepping off the side, remember this pull-out area is twice the size of any pull-out area we have in San Mateo. It's big. It accommodates this. It moves you out of the walkway, makes it ADA compliant. You know, it allows you to sit, look at it at a comfortable angle, make you think everything about it, and hopefully inspire you to be as great as the people we're talking about. Now, our marker comes from a vision that actually started in this room 17 years ago when we were doing Bay Meadows. And I was sitting up where you were. And we were wondering, what type of park design for Bay Meadows? You know, Bay Meadows has a very unique park design, and that took a lot of work. And it was the idea is to connect the neighborhoods together and actually work its way downtown. It was the idea of the urban trail. Our concept is having an urban trail all the way from Shoreline Park all the way to Sugarloaf. And this is how the vision began. And we're looking to be able to think about how to do this. And like I said, the markers in the parks would be different. You know, we want to commemorate the parks. We have a park on B, around 12th or 10th, you know, Hayward Square. Why is that there? That's a real complicated history behind it. And it also involves one of the most earliest urban transit districts ever in the United States. There was a second rail line that never got built. It's all about that. Long story, lots of words. But like a traffic intersection where you have a stop sign, you just don't have stop signs. You have roundabouts and you have traffic lights or maybe yields. We look for the right solution for the right time. What we're asking for is an above-ground marker where the message is delivered properly and easily and effectively with the most minimum impact. We're not going to impact in ADA. It probably even solves some problems of people using it as a landing where they park the car and the end of the car is in the crosswalk. It eliminates those problems. The height isn't a problem. We have fence ordinances that are higher than the standing height of this marker. You know, it is what I'm looking for is approval on this idea for this unique location. Not all locations, for this unique location. So thank you for your time. I've noticed I'm used up mine. I'm really proud of San Mateo. I really want to proud the Mitch. I want to be inspirational. and just think all the different ways we can do this. Don't limit yourself to a style or marker. Limit your style to the messages you want to deliver and be inspirational about it, how you can best deliver it.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you for all your service to San Mateo. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your work and advocacy on this particular project. Unless there's...
Could I ask Fred a question while
Sure.
it's still here?
Sure.
Sure. Fred, maybe I missed this, but did you address...
Excuse me?
I said maybe I missed this, but did you address the question of vandalism? If somebody damages the work, what would your plan be then? Okay.
Real quick, our understanding, he asked a question about vandalism, and I would just state that it is our understanding and our recommendation that once these are installed, they do become property of the city. So it would be the city's responsibility, no matter what format it's in. We're suggesting that we take on responsibility for maintaining them.
If I could address the vandalism a little bit too. The marker you saw in the example is in the town of Corvallis. The standing marker there was put in 1983. You notice the colors are real vibrant. It has stand the test of time of almost 40 years. You know, it's 37 years now, okay? It's a college town. Vandalism is common. I didn't see any vandalism. I've been going to that town for over 10 years. Maybe it's vandalism is a San Mateo problem. I don't believe it is. But I think they stand the test of time with minimum effort.
I've been there. It's a nice little place. Yeah. Only one other question. If you orient it if you put it across the street, and you can orient it so that if you're looking at it, you're looking at where the building is, which at some point the building may be gone.
Yes.
Right?
But it isn't about the building.
How do people know where the building, I don't see on your graphic here of what you're proposing, an actual, something that indicates where it stands, right? And that's all. You can figure that out later. I just wanted to mention
it's in the
that.
text. It's on the corner.
Yeah.
But really, the message in the text isn't about the building.
I read it. Thank you.
Yeah, it is about the community in the
right.
building.
And I had a question, Fred, if you'll share a little bit more about the background of this project and how you came about this proposed design, and that the background around the design being approved by the donors of to your project.
Okay. This came from a phone call that I got from the San Mateo County Historical Association. They were approached by the community saying that, you know, some way the county should commemorate this spot. And they said, we can only do county stuff in county operated areas. You know, that's a city thing. The president of the San Mateo County Historical Association is Mitch Postle. I went to high school with him. This is where you pick up the phone call and say, hey, Fred, what can we do? You're on city council. I said, no, I've retired. I do other things now. And he says, can you help me with this? And so he put me together with the family. We have Jacqueline G. here. She is one of the family members. I met her the first time with Mitch Postle and a few other people. We talked about why it was important. Mitch said he would help write this up so it was in a correct historical context. And this, from that point on, I contacted the city at the very beginning to say, what do we have to do? How do we best do this? And we went through that process, and I kept them informed as we went along and raised the money. The Asian American community raised most of the money for this. I would like to be able to also say of the other areas and say, look at this example we have. We like to do this too. And if I show them a plaque in the ground and saying, but it won't be like that, I have a marketing problem. You'll get something different. I'm sure it will be better. I assure you that. And they'll look at what's there and say, So I like to be, like you said, consistent. I think consistency, as Diana brought up, is important, particularly when you're starting off in a project.
Thank you, Fred. If there's no other questions at this time, I'm going to open it up to public comment to allow anyone who has a public comment on this item to speak at this time. Thank you so much, Fred.
Thank you.
I see at least 2 other speakers who would like to speak, so 3 minutes for each of you, and then we'll bring it back to the council. Thank you, Fred. Yeah, do we have a speaker slip already, or?
Go ahead. Can you come to the microphone?
I don't support in-ground historical markers. I think the historical markers should be respected, and I don't feel like in-ground historical markers would respect the history of San Mateo or any kind of history. We should honor it in a respectful way and figure out the right placement of the historical marker other than in-ground.
Thank you so much. Next speaker. Yes, young man.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm Cliff Robbins. I live on Burial Lane in San
Welcome.
Mateo. Yeah, most of y'all know me. I'm a Sustainability and Infrastructure Commissioner. I'm not here on behalf of the commission. I'm here as a private citizen, but I'm also president of the Park Foundation and a founding member. I'll try and keep it brief, which is rare for me, I know, some of you know. So I'll pretty much say whatever Fred said was right, with one twist, that this isn't, at first blush, a Park Foundation item. We've spent a lot of time helping other parks. When Beresford did the redo, we raised a lot of money for that. We do the music festival in the summer. We've extended that by our fundraising. What we're trying to do here is the first step of what we hope to see as an urban trail, basically turn the city into a park. So that's really the context. I think the Chingley Laundry marker would stand on its own historically. If nothing else ever happened, that's a worthwhile project. But the Park Foundation sees this as one step in what we hope will be further activity to try and put historical markers around the city, map them out, encourage people to see the city as a park and to actually walk around the city, follow those markers, increasing the attractiveness of the city. All deference to staff and to Sean, because everybody knows I'm a lawyer. I did look at the policy, and just a couple comments. I think on the marker format, as Fred indicated, we feel pretty strongly not only for this particular marker that it should probably be an above ground, but we'd like to see the policy at least list the 3 options. You can prioritize them. Obviously, the council gets to decide with respect to any particular marker, but I hate to see these above ground not in the policy at all. Lastly, in the replacement marker provision, I would like to see an if feasible concept built in. As the Park Foundation, we hope to be around for many years, and if we need to come and step in, we would. But I think there are other groups who are going to raise money and may not be around. Another way to go, and I'm as cheap as anyone, but one option would be for the city to consider adding a little price. Yeah, maybe not as everybody, but as most. Similar to what a lot of cities do, and I'm not sure if we're doing it. I haven't been on the Park Commission in a while, but as it comes to benches, a commemorative bench, you add a little bit to the fee to cover the maintenance. And the Park Foundation, if that was what the council wanted, would probably come up with a little extra money so that would be built in to cover some of the cost of the next 10 years or whatever. That's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Cliff. If there's no further public comment, one more. Come on in. We're ready for you. Oh, slowly.
My name is Melody Liu, and I live on 27th Avenue. And I just have to say there are two things here. One is a policy on historical markers or markers, and the other one is this first marker. So it seems like there are two issues here. I have to say, when I talked to Fred, I don't know how long ago, it was such a good idea to have that urban trail for San Mateo. I've lived here for 43 years. And, well, no longer than 43 years, just when I returned after college, 43 years. And, you know, San Mateo is my place, so I really like the idea of the urban trail. I liked Fred's idea that message should choose the marker. So when you're choosing the marker size or whatever, you know, consider the message. And, you know, in all deference to staff, you know, was there a historical, like, was Mitch Postel consulted in terms of what is the purpose of a historical marker and, you know, message to follow the purpose, different purposes for the markers, so that's a completely separate issue from the Chingley Laundry. So I think you should think of that in terms of policy apart from the Chingley Laundry, and you're doing this for all the markers. So it's got to be a big picture kind of, really something to consider in depth rather than just around this one marker. The other thing was I was the immediate past president of the Organization of Chinese Americans, which really is noted as OCA, which is a social justice organization. It's a national organization. We have a San Mateo County chapter here. And we did contribute to the marker, so we really would like to see the marker go forward. As to how you wish to do it, of course, that's City Council's prerogative and staff's prerogative. So we just want to encourage getting the marker in place and commemorating what I think would be the first step, a great first step in the urban trail. So thank you.
Melanie, thank you so much, and let us know when you're ready to be back on a commission. If there's no other public comment at this time, then I'm going to bring it back to the council, close the public comment period, and we can have a discussion about these two items. Samantha, do you want to lead that discussion, and we can answer those questions in order?
Sure. Did you guys have any follow-up questions for me before we go back to the specific questions or in regards to anything that was said in the public? Nope.
First question, yes.
Is it that you have to be done? I didn't follow.
Well, you know, sometimes people fall from grace. You might not want to have a permanent marker someplace.
So it would be mandated you would have to, it would be posthumous? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Okay, just the light have to be fully lived before it can be honored. Okay, got it. All right, and you say yes, yes?
Yes.
Does council have a preferred prototype or design, or do you support staff's recommendation for the in-ground marker prototype?
Go ahead, Eric.
All right. You know, I mean, first, I just want to say I really appreciate and admire all the work, especially you, Mr. Hansen, but all of you doing to preserve this important part of San Mateo's history. I think that just needs to be said first off. But I'm a little bit conflicted here because I love the idea of the urban trail. And this was something that I was really looking forward to pursuing, especially when we were redoing our downtown plan and we're kind of redefining our historical boundaries. And I think it really adds to the experience of a historical downtown. And we have one of the few historical downtowns on the peninsula. So I love the idea. I think that whatever we decide to do here, I have trouble looking at this one in just isolation because I think this is just the first of hopefully many. So it really needs to be we need to look at this comprehensively and make sure that there's a uniform appearance. I respectfully disagree that we should be having a whole bunch of different types of ones. I think that we want to have more of a universal appearance, in my opinion. And so I don't know if I'm ready to make a decision. If you believe the way I do, and I'm sure members up here probably don't agree with everything, but if you agree that we need uniformity and that we want to do this all over downtown, I think it's a pretty big decision because we're going to need to be thinking about what's going to work in other areas as well. I think it'd be easy to say, the easy thing to do would say, this is we want to do this. This is a very important part of San Mateo history. Let's just do it, and we'll move on to the other areas when we do it. But then this would kind of stand out if we don't use whatever design we'd use for this one. It would stand out in the rest of the downtown. So I'm not ready to pick a preferred design type because I really believe in uniformity, and I really think that we're going to need to look at what would work elsewhere as well.
So I do just want to clarify, Mr. Hansen's urban trail proposal, as far as I know, doesn't include any, if not many, more specifically in the downtown. So this, when we spoke about it, the way he presented it was going to be a trail that would connect the various parks, and that these would be primarily located in parks.
Okay.
And in doing some research on what the city has currently, consistency isn't how I would describe it. But I will say that I think there are times when the location needs to kind of dictate the format. So we have seen the above ground type that Mr. Hansen is describing work very well in some of our parks. We've seen different kinds in areas of the parks as well. We felt, though, that for markers specifically in the public right-of-way, so streets and sidewalks, knowing that this is also near downtown, that the in-ground marker makes the most sense for that location.
Okay, so then I misunderstood what an urban trail was, because when I think of an urban trail, I think of when you go like on the Barbary Coast in San Francisco, and you see that that's where the old ship saloon was, and this is where. So maybe not urban trail, but I'm talking about more celebrating the history of all our historical buildings that we have in downtown, and I'm sure this is just one of many.
Yes, and again, we do prefer that these types of markers be installed on private property or directly affixed to a building.
Right.
I was told that currently is not something that they're able to look at right now. So we're not sure how often this is actually going to come before you, and we wanted to keep it somewhat limited, knowing that there are going to be times where you guys would like to consider different formats, and that there might be a better format based on the location.
Is there a way to have different formats that are that look like they're together and not like a bronze plaque here, an enamel sign up? I mean, is there a way to, have you found any examples of other cities that kind of thread that needle that we're talking about, like not having the actual place dictate, the message dictate what it looks like, but it doesn't look like we've just kind of throwing up this where here, putting a plaque up here, putting.
Yeah, in the communities that we reviewed that had very consistent programs in place, they were often driven more by the council themselves. And there was some consistency. But again, I don't want to limit what we're doing because we are narrowing this to the public right-of-way based on just what other communities are doing. And I think we do want to be mindful of Mr. Hansen's intentions with the urban trail. I think having decided to go with this one first just because it is the public right-of-way, and we do believe there are considerations that we need to look at that you might not necessarily need to take into factor in the parks. That's just sort of where we're at with starting with this one. But I can appreciate your desire to want to have some consistency for these. But right now, all we have in front of us is this specific proposal. I think the urban trail is still conceptual.
Last quick question. Why wouldn't this work put on, like traditionally, like on the building where you can have it's right there and.
It's my understanding that the family is still considering what to do with the building, and at this time, I've been told by Mr. Hansen they're not able to commit or interested, or I should say, at this time I was told that there has not been a commitment to put it on the building.
Anyone want to go next?
So I have some questions. I like the idea of the trail, and I guess there would be a map, historical markers, and art. I would like to know if we would be recognizing art, because we do have some art, not only downtown, but in our parks. We have the giraffe. We have different things that could also be put on a map and directing people to go and see these things. Also, we're always looking to get new art at new developments. For instance, if we get a new development there at the corner of it's Ellsworth and 3rd Avenue, where the Aaron Brothers has been. That proposal, I don't know if it's going to include any art, but there's a planter area out there where art can be, some kind of a sculpture could be put there or something, right? We're looking for art on all the new developments. And I'm wondering, would we be looking to list all those at least on the map, and maybe even put out some kind of marker saying this represents, or this was placed by, or this was part of this development. So that's one kind of thing to think about. But I understand the thoughts about consistency, and I like your idea about maybe different kinds of things that sort of go together. They're not going to be right next to each other. I think that's one thing, but they should have some sort of consistency. And rather than just be totally case by case and completely different. And I really think the posthumous idea is important if we're recognizing individuals. But other than that, I think those are my thoughts.
I'm really excited about this idea and the intent behind it, and I really commend the amount of work that went into it and the generosity that's behind it. And so I'm so thrilled that this moment has come before us, and that we're at a point where we can actually make some decisions and support it. So I had some thoughts. I'm fine with individuals being commemorated posthumously. Although I can think of many individuals that are still alive that I would love to commemorate. But I understand the idea, and so I can support that. I think that many of the things that Mr. Robbins said make a lot of sense to me in terms of having more flexibility in the resolution that we adopt. I personally believe that the intent to educate and the intent to bring about a story should be a major driver in the design. And if we're looking at historic landmarks with certain architectural features, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me to have a consistent template affixed to a building that's like in conflict with the aesthetics of the building. So, and knowing that the global vision of this will be on property, potentially in the right of way, in park spaces, the very different environments that these markers will be interacting with and placemaking are diverse in themselves. And so I don't have, I don't think there's, for me, a very strong case to have a consistent design. I think that design can be decided and driven by the environment. in the public right-of-way, I think that maintenance and safety and cost all do need to be considered, but I also think that those things can be considered in the context of each space, and that to me is another reason to support the direction of Cliff in having the 3 options listed, maybe by preference, and then decided as we go. And then just lastly, in terms of taking responsibility for installing and maintaining the markers, I definitely would support that. And in addition to that, I hope that we can look to the foundations to recover some of those costs in the fundraising. So that maintenance cost is baked in. So that's for this section.
Diane.
Can I ask you to go back to the photograph of this site, those 4 corners that you had showed us? Okay. And the proposal is to be across the street from the site and looking back at it, even though that building could go away, right? Okay. All right. So I'm torn. So these are the concerns that I have. In the right-of-way, represents to me a restricted use of land that such that it doesn't make sense to look down and walk over something. Sometimes in the right-of-way, you have to have things do dual duty, if you will, meaning being able to walk over them, but at the same time commemorating the site. So I kind of like that idea of the flexibility, even though I am a little bit concerned that it may not give as much gravitas to it if you happen to be walking over the site. For purposes of consistency, one of the things that I might suggest is that the materials be the same at every location. It may be that, I know there's one in Central Park near the flag that is, do you know that one? It's sort of like a square and then the plaque on it is at an angle. Do you know that one? Is it at the flag in Central Park?
I think it's
Mounted on stone.
near the,
Yes.
I'm sorry, coal.
Is it near the pump house?
Is it the pump house? Yeah, it's near the pump house.
Just to be clear, there are 9 markers in Central Park, so you could be talking
Is that the one
about any of them.
that you're talking
I'm
about?
talking
It's
about the one
on-
near the flag, but you described it. Yeah, it's set in stone and
It's
it's at
set-
an angle. But you
Yeah.
see that if you did that on a right-of-way, that's going to take up some room on the right-of-way. And so I worry about the right-of-way being able to do its dual duty of keeping people going as well as commemorating something. So in my mind, I would actually put this one in the sidewalk. I would keep it big. I would keep the story there. And for purposes of consistency, it's not so much for me about design as it is the materials. Each time you come, I mean, like when you think about, not that we're that entity, but when you think about stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, they're all uniform, right? They all are made of, well, those all are all the same. But if you had things around the city, if they were all like, every time you come upon one that's cast in stone, you know this is part of San Mateo's story, as Ms. Liu suggested, and I like that idea for sure. So that's kind of where I am. I worry about not giving it the gravitas, but I also understand that we have to share space. So that's where I am with it, and I like the consistency of materials. And I would like to tell a greater story than Chingley Laundry was here. You know, I think it's very important to show that it was, it created a community, it showed that we were a diverse community, you know, all those good things. And stood up for, what was it, liberty, or did it actually stand for?
Victory.
Victory, thank you, victory. So, I mean, those are very cool facts for me. That's it.
Could you go to the next? And there's a
Yeah.
question after there.
Oh, I didn't answer all of them?
No,
Yeah, I was hoping we could kind of take this in 2 parts, just because I know they're interrelated, but they could also be viewed separately to an extent. So what I'm hearing so far is yes on posthumously. I'm hearing still some mixed opinions on a preferred prototype for the marker policy. And then I haven't heard consistency yet about should the city take on responsibility, but it's sounding like we're leaning towards yes.
Could I, Mr. Mayor?
I haven't gone yet, but go ahead, Rick.
Well, you can go last. You know, I was thinking, we already have at the Baywood Theater a historical marker on the surface of the building. And I've seen that done at other buildings too. And I think it works good in those situations. So perhaps we could have a bifurcated policy. It says for buildings, they're mounted on the building. And in this case, maybe it could be temporarily mounted on this building. And then in whatever gets approved later goes with it, this requirement that the thing goes back up on the building, recognizing the existing or the past use.
So staff has recommended that in general, we encourage these markers to be installed on private property, and that would include to be affixed on a building.
Yeah.
That is specifically regulated by the city's sign ordinance.
Right. So then
In
for
this-
other purposes, we could have a different standard. Like, let's say we're recognizing a mural, you know, or a statue, right? Those could have some other way of marking them, or an individual, right? Some other way that the map will bring it all together, right? So there could be a bifurcated policy that ties, and then a map, you know, some description that ties it all together.
So we'd have to do a little more research in collaboration with the city attorney's office just to
It's a
see how that
suggestion.
could
Yeah.
interrelate.
Also, I think we should take on responsibility of installing and maintaining.
Okay.
For those of my fellow council members that are saying take on the responsibility of maintaining, is that, I mean, is that regardless of what marker we choose and regardless of what the costs might be, without any estimate on what this could be?
So my thoughts on that, if the marker's in public property, it's ours. If it's on a building, it belongs to whoever owns the building.
Right, but the cost could depend on what design we choose. And it could be, you know, huge fluctuations in what the cost would be.
I will just add, if this helps at all, that in the policy, council does retain discretion to remove a marker if it so chooses. So if down the line something becomes an issue, it becomes cost prohibitive to keep it, council's able to have it removed.
So I'm going to answer these questions as directly as I can. I don't see the necessity to make this posthumous if a council in the future chooses to put up a plaque or a marker for someone who's still alive or something else. Or something else. I don't see the necessity to make it posthumous. I can understand why councils might not want to recognize somebody until they're deceased, but I don't see the necessity to make that a specific policy. Does as far as a preferred prototype and design, we have so many markers all over the city that are so different in so many ways that take completely different forms. Starting an arbitrary policy now that all future markers look exactly the same doesn't make sense to me unless they all follow the same theme. For example, the urban trail, I think all of those, the urban trail, which right now is a half-baked idea that may come together in the future. If we were going to do an urban trail, we should approve them all at the same time and they should all look the same. But for now, I don't see the necessity in this instance to form a policy that they all look the same in the future. Should the city take on the responsibility of installing and maintaining? I don't know. Maintaining, I guess, if it's in the park, we're going to maintain it because we're going to take care of it so that it looks like it's in a park. If it's in the public right-of-way, we're going to maintain it because it's on a sidewalk or in the public right-of-way. I don't know that we necessarily need to take on the responsibility of maintaining them if they're on private property, and I'm not sure that you're suggesting that. Only in the public right-of-way. Mm-hmm. So, yes, in the public right-of-way, we can maintain it. I don't even know that we need to take on the responsibility of installing it necessarily, but that depends. Those aren't helpful answers, but those are my answers. Why don't we? I think this whole this whole part of the conversation is a lot more hypothetical than the next part.
Okay.
Could we go to the next part and come back?
So does council support a historic marker to commemorate the former site of the Chingley Laundry?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Does council support the proposed Chingley marker in its current design and location?
Can I jump in? I think that there's a very clear precedent that when there's a project underway, a multi-year project, for example, a development, that we don't change the rules or apply new rules along the way. And the fact that this has been in concept and design and fundraised around for many years now, and the donors have approved a design and vision that has withstood the test of time and is proven out in research. I mean, the specific design that's recommended, but it is 40 years old and looks brand new. And so my
answer is yes. What's yours?
My answer is yes, for those reasons.
So I like the design. I'm just still kind of curious about why across the street and how it's oriented in respect to the fact that it could block views of oncoming vehicles or pedestrians. So those orientations of it, I think, need to be looked at carefully so that's placed in such a way that it can minimize those impacts.
Can I answer that? Because I walk down the street all the time, and I actually went to the site with Fred, and to me it makes a lot of sense if you go back to the picture. The sidewalk next to Chingley Laundry is a little bit impacted already. There's a trash can, there's poles, there's a tree, and the bulb out is just not as wide, and it's closer to the parking spaces. So anything that would be sort of towards the curb would risk getting hit potentially by a car door opening. So it does, from a logistical standpoint, make sense to place it across the street because it's a very wide sidewalk, and there's plenty of room. There's no parking interference, and it wouldn't obstruct. In my assessment, my non-engineering assessment, it wouldn't obstruct visibility any more than a trash can.
I don't see a trash can there.
I'm saying, by comparison, if we were to place a trash can there.
No, I'm not. It could be over there. I just think we should be careful how we orient it to limit the impact to visuals of things that are oncoming.
Sure.
Eric?
So I 100% feel that we need to commemorate this location in some way. And I think I'm hearing everybody agree about that. But I do share the concerns that Councilmember Pappen and Councilmember Bonilla brought up of putting it in the public right away. Because yes, it might not be as intrusive as a trash can, but when the trash cans are out, they're very intrusive. And they're only usually there once a day or once a week. So I just want to make sure we get this right. I think we got to do something, but we got to just be careful. We can't just, because all this work has been put into it and something's pretty cool has been proposed. I feel very hesitant to say. I mean, the easy thing to do is say, yeah, let's just do it. But I think that would be a little short-sighted, and I share the concerns. I share those exact concerns.
The other thing that we'd be more than willing to do if Mr. Hansen is we can go back and chat a little further with him about if they're amenable to a different format or a different location near the building that would work. I don't want to presume anything, but I don't know if there's been any further discussions about the potential to have it located on the building any further than last he and I checked in. But if you guys are in support of commemorating the building, but torn on this particular format and location, and wanted to direct staff to go back and work with Mr. Hansen further, I know staff would at least be more than willing to do that.
You know, I just want to add, at one point when I was talking with Mr. Hansen, he said it's really not about the building, it's about the community. Right? And if you read the text, it is about the community. Right? So maybe it doesn't need to be next to or in front of the building. It's about the community. And in that case, it could be on any corner there. As long as it's not impairing visuals and of pedestrians or oncoming cars.
So I would propose that if the council is amenable to this, that we leave it to the Public Works Department, whose job it is to make sure that that we're not impairing drivers' ability to drive through here, to make sure that the marker is not causing any problems for pedestrians or drivers, but to place it in that location in a way that does not impair pedestrians or drivers. Are you amenable to that, Rick?
Yep.
So I'm going to make a motion that we move forward with commemorating the Chingley Laundry at that corner across the street with the design proposed by the Park and Rec Foundation, and that we defer any further discussion on a formal policy for markers to a later time.
Second.
Is that motion clear enough? There's a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? That passes 3-2. Okay. We have reached the point of reports and announcements before we have a closed session with council. Thank you, everyone. I would note for everyone that the county is the lead agency on our response to the coronavirus, and that we're all trying to monitor as closely as possible. There is a website, San Mateo County Health/coronavirus, that I've been trying to get out there to as many people as possible. I don't think it's a good time for us to panic about the coronavirus, but I do think it's a great time for us to stay informed, wash our hands, limit. I think we're going to see over the course of the next few weeks significant policies around public interaction, limiting hand shaking to as little as possible. And my only point is that we stay informed and not panic. But the county, what I was trying to say is the county did open up the Emergency Operations Center to support public health action and monitor the situation. So that is happening. We should all pay attention to that. Any other reports and announcements? Rick?
Been contacted by the gun buyback group that approached us a couple of years ago. They'd like to come back and give us a report on their actions and successes and ask us if we would care to contribute additionally because they're planning another gun buyback. So I told them I would find out what was the council's pleasure on that. We would like to get a report and consider contributing. I think there's a time in April when they may come.
Okay,
to
so
report.
we'll wait for an invitation to that. In full disclosure, I have looked at the stats on how gun buybacks contribute to reducing gun violence, and there's almost no data to support that they are an effective tool. And I think that we have on our agenda for this year, we've prioritized gun safety, but in a way that I think is more tied to reducing gun violence. So I encourage us to continue down the path that we have set out for ourselves. Any other announcements?
I have one. This Saturday, March 7th at 8:30 a.m. at Skyline College in San Bruno, there's the Women's Leadership Conference and Women's Hall of Fame celebration.
Great. Then we will go into our closed session for conference with legal labor negotiators, and then we will report out and adjourn.